Hello, horror lover. Are you ready for a long night of nightmares? Before we begin, I want to ask you to subscribe to the channel, and especially leave a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I'd love to know. Click the like button, all of this because the alarm clock's shrill beeping dragged me from a fitful sleep. I groaned, fumbling to silence the infernal device before forcing my eyes open. The dim light of dawn filtered through my cabin's weathered curtains, painting the room in a pale, ghostly glow. Another day in Shawnee National Forest stretched before me, promising the usual routine of trail maintenance, wildlife monitoring, and tourist management. If only I knew how wrong I was. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, wincing as my bare feet touched the cold wooden floor. "Come on, Sophia," I muttered to myself. Time to face another thrilling day in the exciting world of forest management. The sarcasm in my voice was thick enough to cut with a knife. Don't get me wrong, I loved my job as a forest ranger. The peace, the connection with nature, the satisfaction of preserving this slice of wilderness, it all meant the world to me. But lately, a creeping sense of monotony had begun to set in. Every day felt the same, a blur of green leaves and brown dirt, punctuated by the occasional lost hiker or overeager camper. I needed something to shake things up, to reignite that spark of wonder that had first drawn me to this career. Be careful what you wish for, right? After a quick shower and a breakfast of strong coffee and slightly stale toast, I donned my ranger uniform and stepped out into the crisp morning air. The forest was coming alive around me, a symphony of birdsong and rustling leaves. I took a deep breath, letting the scent of pine and damp earth fill my lungs. "All right, Shawnee," I said to the trees. "What have you got for me today?" I set off on my usual morning patrol, my boots crunching on the leaf-strewn path. The first hour passed uneventfully. I noted a fallen branch blocking one of the lesser-used trails, made a mental note to clear it later, and continued on my way. It was as I was approaching the densest part of the forest, an area we jokingly called the Heart of Darkness, that everything changed. A sound cut through the normal forest ambiance, so faint I almost missed it. I froze, straining my ears. There it was again, a high-pitched wail, like a child crying. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing through the trees. "Is anyone there? Do you need help?" Silence answered me. I was about to chalk it up to an overactive imagination when I heard it again, louder this time. There was no mistaking it. Somewhere in the depths of the forest, a child was crying. My heart began to race. What was a kid doing out here alone? Had a family wandered off the marked trails, or was it something worse, a kidnapping, an abandonment? "Hold on," I shouted, plunging off the trail and into the undergrowth. "I'm coming. Keep making noise so I can find you." The cries grew louder as I pushed deeper into the forest. Branches whipped at my face, roots threatened to trip me, but I pressed on. The sound seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at once, as if the forest itself was weeping. A chill ran down my spine. Something about this wasn't right. The crying. It was too perfect, too constant. Real children's cries fluctuate, hiccup, gasp for breath. This was like a looped recording, playing over and over. I slowed my pace, suddenly wary. "Hello?" I called again, softer this time. "Where are you?" The crying abruptly stopped, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Even the birds had gone quiet. That's when I saw it. A massive fallen log, its hollow interior gaping like a mouth in the forest floor. The crying resumed, unmistakably emanating from within. I approached cautiously, every instinct screaming at me to turn and run. But I couldn't. If there was even a chance a child was trapped in there, I had to help. "Hey there," I said softly, crouching down by the log's opening. "It's okay. I'm here to help. Can you come out?" No response, just that same haunting cry. Taking a deep breath, I pulled out my flashlight and leaned in, shining the beam into the log's dark interior. "It's all right, you're safe now. I'm just going to take a look, okay?" I peered inside, my flashlight illuminating something. Something that made my blood run cold and my mind reel in disbelief. It wasn't a child. It wasn't human at all. In the confined space of the log, a creature writhed and shifted. One moment it looked like a small deer, the next a fox, then a raccoon. But mixed in with the animal forms were flashes of something else. Pale, hairless skin, 2 long limbs, eyes that gleamed with an impossible intelligence. I scrambled backward, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. This couldn't be real. I must be dreaming, or hallucinating, or... The crying stopped. A voice, high and clear, echoed from within the log, but it didn't come through the air. It resonated directly in my mind. "Help me," it pleaded. "Please, I'm trapped. I'm scared." I shook my head violently, pressing my palms against my ears even though I knew it would do no good against a voice in my head. "What are you?" I gasped. "A friend," the voice replied. "A lost one. Please, I mean you no harm. I just want to be free." Against every rational thought, I found myself drawn back to the log. I crouched down again, peering inside. The creature had settled into a form that was almost, but not quite, human. It looked like a child, but with eyes too large, skin too pale, fingers too long and delicate. "What's your name?" I asked, surprised to find my voice steady. "Eoland," the creature replied, its mental voice tinged with relief. "And you are Sophia. I can see your name in your thoughts." I should have been terrified. I should have run screaming for help, or called for backup, or done anything other than what I did next. But something in those 2 large eyes called to me. I saw fear there, yes, but also hope. And loneliness. A loneliness I recognized all too well. "Okay, Eolande," I said, reaching into the log. "Let's get you out of there." As my hand touched its skin, a jolt of electricity seemed to pass between us. Images flashed through my mind. Ancient forests, battles between fantastic creatures and early humans, centuries of hiding and fear. In that instant, I knew that my life would never be the same. I had found something wondrous and terrible, something that would challenge everything I thought I knew about the world. And as I helped Eolande out of that log and into the light of day, I knew that my real journey was only just beginning. My world tilted on its axis as I locked eyes with the creature in the log. Gone was the mundane predictability of my ranger life, replaced by a reality-bending nightmare that threatened to shatter my sanity. The thing, Eolande, it had called itself, stared back at me with eyes that shifted color like oil on water. One moment they were a deep, fathomless black, the next a brilliant, inhuman gold. Its form was in constant flux, rippling and changing like a mirage in the desert heat. "Jesus Christ," I whispered, my voice hoarse with fear. "What the hell are you?" The creature's body elongated, taking on the sleek form of a mountain lion, then shrunk and contorted into the shape of a wide-eyed fawn. Each transformation was accompanied by a sickening sound of crunching bones and stretching skin. "Please," the voice in my head pleaded, a child's soprano tinged with desperation. "Don't be afraid. I won't hurt you." I stumbled backward, leaves crunching under my feet as I tried to put distance between myself and this impossible being. My back slammed into a tree trunk, rough bark scraping my palms as I steadied myself. "Stay back," I shouted, fumbling for the bear spray on my belt. Fat lot of good it would do against whatever this was. The creature's form settled into something vaguely humanoid, a small androgynous child with skin as pale as moonlight and eyes too large for its face. It raised its hands in a gesture of peace, revealing long, delicate fingers that ended in sharp, translucent claws. "Sophia," it said, this time out loud. Its voice was a discordant mix of tones, as if multiple people were speaking in unison. "I am the last of the morphlings. I've been trapped in this form in this log for I don't know how long. Please, I need your help." My mind reeled, struggling to process what I was seeing and hearing. Morphlings? Last of its kind? This had to be some kind of hallucination. Maybe I'd eaten some bad mushrooms or hit my head on a low-hanging branch. This isn't real, I muttered, squeezing my eyes shut. When I open my eyes, you'll be gone and everything will be normal again. I counted to 3 and looked. The creature was still there, watching me with an expression that might have been pity. I assure you, Sophia, I am very real, it said, and I am in very real danger. They're coming for me. A chill ran down my spine. Who's coming? As if in answer, a distant sound echoed through the forest, the baying of hounds. The creature's eyes widened in terror, its form flickering rapidly through a series of small, frightened animals. The hunters, it whispered in my mind. They've pursued my kind for centuries. Please, you must help me. Part of me, the rational, self-preserving part, screamed to run, to alert the authorities, to stay far away from whatever madness this was. But another part, a part I didn't fully understand, felt drawn to this strange, terrified being. I don't know what I can do, I said, surprised to find myself taking a step toward the log. I'm just a forest ranger. I'm not equipped to deal with whatever this is. The creature reached out a hand, now human-like save for those unsettling claws, imploringly. You are more than you know, Sophia. There's a reason I called to you, why you could hear me when no one else could. You have a gift, a connection to the old magics that once filled this world. I shook my head, overwhelmed. Magic? Gifts? You've got the wrong girl. I'm nobody special. The baying of the hounds grew louder. The creature, Eolanda, looked over its shoulder fearfully. There's no time to explain everything now. Please, help me out of this log. I've been trapped here too long. My powers are weak. I can't shift properly to escape. Against my better judgment, I found myself moving closer to the log. If I help you, I said, my voice shaking, you have to promise not to hurt me. And you have to explain everything, understand? Eolan nodded vigorously, its form settling into that of a young child again. I swear it. On my life and the memory of my people, I will not harm you. Taking a deep breath, I reached into the log. My fingers brushed against Eolan's skin, and a jolt of electricity shot up my arm. Visions flashed before my eyes, ancient forests teeming with shape-shifting creatures, battles with early humans wielding crude weapons and torches, centuries of hiding and fear. I gasped, nearly letting go, but Eoland grasped my hand tightly. Don't let go, it pleaded. Pull me out. Gritting my teeth, I heaved backward. Eoland slid from the log with a sound like tearing silk, collapsing onto the forest floor in a heap of trembling limbs. Its form flickered rapidly, child, fox, owl, back to child, before stabilizing into the small, pale, humanoid shape. Thank you, it breathed, looking up at me with those unnerving eyes. You've saved me. Before I could respond, the baying of hounds erupted much closer, accompanied now by shouts and the crashing of underbrush. Eoland scrambled to its feet, panic evident on its too human face. They're here, it hissed. We have to run. I hesitated, my sense of duty warring with the inexplicable urge to protect this strange creature. Wait, maybe I can talk to them. Explain. Eoland gripped my arm with surprising strength. No, they're not like you. They won't listen, won't understand. They'll kill me and anyone who tries to help me. The sound of voices grew closer. I caught snatches of conversation. Energy signature. Containment protocols. Shoot to kill. This was no ordinary search party. Shit, I muttered, making a decision I knew I'd probably regret. Okay, follow me. I know these woods better than anyone. We can lose them in the ravine to the north. Relief flooded Eoland's face. Thank you, Sophia. I knew you were special. As we took off running, dodging between trees and leaping over fallen logs, my mind raced. What the hell had I gotten myself into? Who were these hunters, and why were they after Eoland? And what did it mean about me being special? One thing was certain. My life would never be the same after this day. I'd stepped into a hidden world, one filled with magic and danger and creatures that shouldn't exist. Part of me was terrified, but another part, a part I was only just discovering, thrilled at the adventure. "Stay close," I called back to Eland as we approached the ravine. "It gets tricky here." As we descended into the shadows of the gorge, leaving the shouts and baying hounds behind, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Whatever destiny Eoland thought I had, whatever role I was meant to play in this hidden war, I was committed now. God help me, I thought as we plunged deeper into the unknown. What have I done? The ravine swallowed us whole, its steep walls blocking out the sun and plunging us into a world of shadows and whispers. My boots slipped on moss-covered rocks as I led Eoland deeper into this natural maze, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "Keep up," I hissed over my shoulder, not daring to raise my voice above a whisper. "And for God's sake, try to look human." Oi. Eoland's form rippled like heat haze, settling into the appearance of a young girl with dirty blonde hair and wide, scared eyes. It was a good approximation of humanity, but there was still something off about it. Something in the too fluid way it moved, the unnatural stillness of its chest. Did it even need to breathe? "I'm trying," Eoland's voice echoed in my mind, tinged with exhaustion. "But I'm so weak. The log, it drained me." I wanted to ask how a hollow piece of wood could drain anything, but the baying of hounds echoing off the ravine walls cut the thought short. They were getting closer. "Shit," I muttered, scanning our surroundings. The ravine forked ahead, one path leading deeper into the forest, the other towards a series of caves I'd always been warned to avoid. "This way," I decided, veering towards the caves. "We can lose them in there." Eoland balked, its borrowed human features contorting with fear. "No, not the caves. They're our only shot." I cut in, grabbing its wrist. The skin felt wrong under my fingers, too smooth and slightly too cool. "Unless you want to take your chances with the guys with guns?" After a moment's hesitation, Eoland nodded, allowing me to pull it towards the yawning mouth of the nearest cave. As we crossed the threshold from sunlight to shadow, a shiver ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the sudden drop in temperature. The cave was larger than it appeared from outside, its ceiling lost in darkness above us. Our footsteps echoed ominously, and I fumbled for the flashlight on my belt, cursing as the beam flickered weakly. The batteries were dying, because of course they were. Isn't that how it always goes in situations like this? "We need to go deeper," Eoland whispered, its voice now coming from its mouth rather than my mind. Even in the dim light, I could see its form starting to blur around the edges, the human disguise slipping. There are old things in these caves, things that might hide us. I didn't like the sound of that, but the alternative was worse. We pressed on, the weak beam of my flashlight barely illuminating the path ahead. The air grew thick and stale, carrying strange scents: ozone, decay, and something metallic that reminded me unsettlingly of blood. "So," I said, desperate to break the oppressive silence, "you want to tell me what the hell is going on? Who are those people chasing us? And what exactly are you?" Eoland was quiet for so long I thought it might not answer. When it finally spoke, its voice was heavy with ancient sorrow. Were the Morphlings, shapeshifters, creatures of pure energy and potential. We were here long before humans, living in harmony with the natural world. But then your kind came, with your iron and your fear of the unknown. You hunted us, trapped us, studied us. Those who survived retreated into the wild places, hiding our true nature. It paused, and in the dim light I saw its form shift momentarily into something decidedly inhuman, all angles and shimmering surfaces, before settling back into the girl shape. "I thought I was the last," it continued. "I've been hiding for so long. Decades. Centuries. Time loses meaning when you're alone. But they found me, The Hunters. They're a secret organization, descendants of the original human warriors who first battled my kind. They've dedicated their existence to wiping us out, seeing us as a threat to humanity's dominance. My mind reeled, trying to process this information. It was like something out of a fantasy novel, not real life. And yet, I couldn't deny the evidence of my own eyes. "And me?" I asked. "Where do I fit into all this? You said I was special." Aoland turned to me, its two large eyes seeming to glow faintly in the darkness. "You are. You have the old blood, the potential for magic that most humans have forgotten. That's why you could hear my cries when no one else could. Why you can see my true form." I opened my mouth to argue. I was no one special, just a forest ranger with a tendency to daydream, when a sound from deeper in the cave froze the words in my throat. It was a skittering noise, like thousands of tiny legs moving across stone. "What was that?" I whispered, my flashlight beam darting wildly across the cave walls. Aoland's form shimmered, fear evident in every line of its body. "The Guardians," it breathed. "The old things I spoke of. They're waking up." As if on cue, the beam of my flashlight caught something moving on the cave wall. At first I thought it was just shadows playing tricks on my eyes. But then I saw it clearly, a mass of chitinous bodies, each the size of a dinner plate, scuttling towards us with alarming speed. "Run!" I yelled, all thoughts of stealth forgotten. We bolted deeper into the cave, the sound of 1,000 skittering legs pursuing us. Behind us, I heard shouts and the beam of powerful flashlights. The hunters had found the cave entrance. We were trapped between two nightmares, with nowhere to go but forward. The cave narrowed, forcing us to slow our pace. My lungs burned, each breath tasting of dust and that unsettling metallic scent. Aoland stumbled, its human form flickering like a bad TV signal. "I can't," it gasped. "Too weak. You have to go on without me." I surprised myself by grabbing its arm, hauling it back to its feet. "Not a chance. We're in this together now, whatever the hell this is." Suddenly, the cave opened up into a vast chamber. My dying flashlight couldn't penetrate the darkness, but I sensed the immensity of the space around us. The air felt different here, charged with some strange energy that made my skin tingle. "We're here," Aoland whispered, awe and fear mingling in its voice. "The heart of the old place." Before I could ask what that meant, a sound like the world's largest stone door grinding open echoed through the chamber. Greenish light began to seep from cracks in the floor and walls, illuminating the space in an eerie glow. What I saw made me wish for the darkness again. The chamber was filled with things, creatures that defied description, all tentacles and eyes and impossible geometries. They stirred slowly, awakening from what must have been an eons-long slumber, and they were all looking at us. Behind us, the chittering of the cave guardians grew louder. Beyond them, I could hear the shouts of the hunters drawing nearer. We were out of options, out of time, and quite possibly out of our minds to have come here. But as I stood there holding the hand of a shape-shifting creature from legend, facing horrors that H.P. Lovecraft couldn't have imagined in his worst nightmares, I felt something unexpected. I felt alive. "Well," I said, squeezing Aolanda's hand. "What now?" As the creatures of the deep cave stirred and the hunters closed in, I realized that my ordinary life was well and truly over. Whatever came next, there was no going back. And God help me, part of me was thrilled by that thought. The trek back to my cabin was a blur of paranoia and adrenaline. Every snapping twig was a pursuer, every shadow a potential threat. Aoland, still in the form of a pale, otherworldly child, clung to my hand with inhuman strength. As we approached the weathered structure I called home, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in bruised purples and angry reds. A fitting end to a day that had shattered my perception of reality. "Quick," I hissed, fumbling with my keys. "Get inside." I ushered Aoland through the door, casting one last nervous glance at the darkening forest before locking us in. The familiar confines of my cabin felt alien now, as if I'd brought a piece of another world across the threshold. Eolande stood in the center of the room, those two large eyes taking in every detail. "Your dwelling," it said, its voice a discordant mix of childish wonder and ancient wisdom. "It's quaint." I snorted, the absurdity of the situation finally hitting me. "Glad you approve. It's not exactly built for hiding fugitive shapeshifters, but it'll have to do." As the adrenaline ebbed, exhaustion hit me like a physical blow. I slumped into my worn armchair, running a trembling hand through my hair. "Jesus Christ," I muttered. "What the hell have I gotten myself into?" Eolande approached, its bare feet silent on the wooden floor. "You've taken the first step on a journey, Sophia. One that was always meant for you." I looked up, meeting those unsettling eyes. What's that supposed to mean? Why me? The creature's form shimmered, briefly taking on the appearance of an elderly man before settling back into the childlike shape. "There has always been a connection between your kind and mine. Most humans have lost it, but some, like you, still carry the old magic in their blood." "Magic?" I laughed bitterly. "I'm a forest ranger, not a wizard. The only magic I know is how to deal with idiot campers and lost hikers." Eolande smiled, an expression that looked wrong on its too perfect face. "And yet you heard my call when no one else could. You saw through my illusions. You have a gift, Sophia, whether you believe it or not." I was about to argue further when a wave of dizziness washed over me. The events of the day, the terror and wonder and impossibility of it all, came crashing down. I swayed in my seat, black spots dancing at the edges of my vision. I need to lie down," I mumbled. "This is all too much." Eolande's cool hand touched my forehead. "Rest," it said softly. "I will watch over you." As I stumbled to my bed, a thought occurred to me. "Wait," I said, turning to face the creature. "Those men chasing you and the hunters, what if they track us here?" A shadow passed over Eolande's face. "I've masked our trail as best I could, but you're right to be cautious. Sleep lightly, and be ready to run if necessary." "Great. Just great." I collapsed onto my bed, not bothering to undress. As exhaustion pulled me under, I saw Eolande settle into a cross-legged position on the floor, its form flickering between various animals like a living kaleidoscope. Sleep came quickly, but it was far from restful. In my dreams, I ran through endless forests, pursued by faceless men with gnashing hounds. I saw cities built in the treetops, populated by beings that shifted and changed with every step. I witnessed battles between early humans and creatures of myth, saw the slow retreat of magic from the world. And through it all, a voice whispered in my mind, "Remember, Sophia, remember who you are." I jolted awake with a gasp, drenched in sweat. Pale morning light filtered through my window, and for a moment, I thought it had all been a bizarre dream. Then I saw the state of my cabin. The place had been ransacked, drawers pulled out and emptied, books scattered across the floor, furniture overturned, and Eolande was nowhere to be seen. "No," I whispered, stumbling out of bed. "No, no, no." I searched every corner of the cabin, calling Eolande's name in increasingly panicked tones. Nothing. The creature had vanished. Had the hunters found us? Had they taken Eolande while I slept? But if so, why leave me alive? As I stood in the midst of the chaos, trying to make sense of what had happened, my eyes fell on something out of place. There, on the battered coffee table, was a single feather. It shimmered with an opalescent light, changing color as I watched. I picked it up with trembling fingers. It was warm to the touch, thrumming with a strange energy. "Eolande," I said softly, half expecting the feather to answer. Silence. But as I held the feather, images flashed through my mind. A cave, deep in the forest, a sense of fear, of desperation. and a plea. Find me. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. Part of me wanted to ignore it all, to call the authorities and wash my hands of this insanity. But I knew I couldn't. Whatever was happening, whatever role I had to play in it, I was committed now. All right, I said to the empty room. Let's do this. I quickly gathered supplies: water, food, first aid kit, flashlight. As I was about to leave, my eyes fell on my grandfather's old hunting rifle, mounted above the fireplace. After a moment's hesitation, I took it down and checked the ammunition. Better safe than sorry. Just as I reached for the door, a sharp knock froze me in place. "Ms. Lawson?" a man's voice called from outside. "This is Agent Thompson with the U.S. Forest Service. We need to ask you a few questions about some unusual activity in the area." My heart raced. The hunters. They had to be. "Just a moment," I called, trying to keep my voice steady. I looked around frantically, spotting the small window in my bathroom. It would be a tight squeeze, but... "Ms. Lawson, please open the door. This is a matter of national security." I was already halfway through the window, my boots crunching on fallen leaves as I dropped to the ground outside. "Ms. Lawson." The voice was sharper now, accompanied by the sound of a fist pounding on wood. I didn't wait to hear more. I took off running, plunging into the familiar embrace of the forest. The feather burned in my pocket, guiding me towards whatever destiny awaited. As I ran, dodging branches and leaping over fallen logs, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was leaving my old life behind forever. Whatever lay ahead, magic, danger, or both, there was no going back now. "I'm coming, Aoland," I whispered to the wind. Hold on. The forest swallowed me and the hunt was on. The forest was alive with whispers. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig sent my heart racing. I'd spent years in these woods, thought I knew every inch of them. But now they felt alien, hostile. The trees loomed over me like silent sentinels, their branches reaching out like gnarled fingers, ready to snatch me up. The feather in my pocket pulsed with an otherworldly warmth, guiding me deeper into the heart of Shawnee National Forest. I tried not to think about the agents I'd left behind at my cabin, or what would happen if, when, they caught up to me. "Where are you taking me, Aolande?" I muttered, pushing through a particularly thick patch of underbrush. My arms were scratched and bleeding, my ranger uniform torn in a dozen places. I probably looked like a madwoman, stumbling through the woods with a rifle slung over my shoulder and wild eyes darting in every direction. Hell, maybe I was mad. Maybe this was all some kind of mental breakdown, and I'd wake up in a padded cell somewhere. The thought had barely crossed my mind when I burst into a small clearing and saw it. The cave. It was little more than a dark maw in the side of a rocky hill, easily missed if you weren't looking for it. But the feather in my pocket practically vibrated, leaving no doubt that this was my destination. I approached cautiously, rifle at the ready. "Aolande?" I called softly. "Are you in there?" No response. Just the soft drip of water from unseen stalactites and the flutter of disturbed bats deeper in the cave. "Great," I muttered. "Because going into a dark cave to look for a shape-shifting creature is definitely a smart move, Sophia. Not horror movie behavior at all." Nevertheless, I clicked on my flashlight and stepped into the gloom. The beam of light seemed pitiful against the oppressive darkness, barely illuminating a few feet ahead. The air was thick with the musty smell of damp earth and something else, something old and not quite natural. I'd gone maybe 20 feet into the cave when I heard it, a soft whimper like a wounded animal or a frightened child. "Aolande," I called again, swinging my flashlight toward the sound. "Is that you?" The whimpering stopped abruptly, replaced by a scrabbling noise. Something was moving in the darkness just beyond the reach of my light. My finger tightened on the rifle's trigger. "I swear to God, if you jump out at me, I'll shoot first and ask questions later." "Sophia?" The voice that echoed through the cave was Aolande's, but distorted, as if coming from underwater. "You came." I wasn't sure you would. I relaxed slightly, lowering the rifle. Yeah, well, I'm starting to think I'm not too bright. Where are you? What happened? A figure shuffled into the edge of my flashlight beam. I sucked in a sharp breath. It was Yolande, but wrong. Its form was unstable, flickering between human and animal shapes so quickly it was nauseating to look at. One moment it was the pale, childlike being I'd first encountered, the next a snarling wolf, then a screaming eagle, then something straight out of a nightmare with too many limbs and eyes. Jesus, I breathed, taking an involuntary step back. Yolande's form finally settled into something vaguely humanoid, though its skin seemed to ripple and shift like water. I'm sorry, it said, its voice a cacophony of different tones. I can't control it. The hunters, they did something to me. Poisoned me, I think. I frowned, concern overriding my fear. Poisoned? How? When? At your dwelling. They came while you slept. I tried to lead them away to protect you, but Yolande's form rippled violently, briefly taking on the shape of a massive bear before collapsing back into itself. They were prepared, had weapons I've never seen before. I barely escaped. Guilt twisted in my gut. I'd been sleeping while Yolande fought for its life. Some protector I was. Okay, I said, trying to sound calmer than I felt. Okay, we can figure this out. There has to be a cure, right? Some way to counteract whatever they did to you? Yolande's two large eyes fixed on me, filled with a mixture of hope and despair. There is a way. But it's dangerous, Sophia. I had no right to drag you into this, to put you at risk. I barked out a laugh. Little late for that, don't you think? I'm already harboring a fugitive shapeshifter and running from some kind of secret government agency. Might as well go all in. A sound from deeper in the cave made us both freeze. Footsteps, and the low murmur of voices. They found us. Yolande whispered, terror evident in its ever-changing features. I raised my rifle, aiming it at the darkness beyond. How? I was careful. I covered our tracks. The poison, Yolande hissed. It's not just hurting me, it's like a beacon. They can track me now. The voices grew louder. I caught snippets of conversation. Energy signature strongest here. Shoot to kill if necessary. My mind raced. We were trapped in here, cornered like animals, but maybe... Yolande, I said urgently. Can you still shapeshift? Even a little? The creature nodded, its form rippling. Barely. It's painful, and I can't hold a shape for long. Why? I grinned, a plan forming. It was insane, probably suicidal, but it was all we had. Because we're going to pull a little bait and switch. Here's what we're going to do. Moments later, when the hunters rounded the corner, their flashlights illuminated a strange scene. There was me, rifle aimed squarely at them, and cowering behind me, a terrified-looking park ranger, a perfect copy of myself. "Stop right there," I shouted, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "I've got a civilian here, and I'm not afraid to shoot." The lead hunter, a tall man with a face like it was carved from granite, held up a hand. "Easy now, Miss Lawson. We're with the government. We're only here to help." I snorted. "Yeah, I've seen the kind of help you offer. Stay back, or I start shooting." The man's eyes narrowed, flicking between me and the cowering ranger behind me. I saw the moment of doubt, the flash of confusion in his eyes. Good. Let him wonder which one of us was real. "Ms. Lawson?" He tried again, his voice dripping with fake concern. "I understand you're frightened, but you don't know what you're dealing with. That creature is dangerous, a threat to national security. Hand it over, and we can all walk out of here safely." I felt Yolande trembling behind me, its hold on my shape faltering. We didn't have much time. "You want it?" I snarled. "Come and get it!" I fired a shot into the cave ceiling. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, sending a shower of rocks and dust raining down. In the confusion, I grabbed Yolande's hand and ran, plunging deeper into the darkness of the cave. Shouts echoed behind us, followed by the sound of pursuit. But I had the advantage, a lifetime of exploring these woods, and a desperate determination to protect the impossible being at my side. As we ran, ducking under low-hanging stalactites and splashing through underground streams, I couldn't help but laugh. 24 hours ago, my biggest concern had been filing my monthly report on time. Now I was running from shadowy government agents, protecting a shape-shifting creature, and diving headfirst into a world I never knew existed. "What's so funny?" Eolanda gasped, its form flickering between my shape and its own. I squeezed its hand, feeling that strange electric current flow between us. "Just thinking," I panted. "Be careful what you wish for, right? I wanted some excitement in my life. Guess I got it in spades." Eolan's laugh was a strange, multi-toned thing, but filled with genuine mirth. "Oh, Sophia," it said, "you have no idea. This is only the beginning." As we plunged deeper into the earth, leaving the shouts of our pursuers behind. The darkness was absolute, pressing against my eyeballs like a living thing. Our ragged breathing echoed off unseen walls, mixing with the distant shouts of our pursuers and the steady drip of water from somewhere in the blackness. I fumbled with my flashlight, praying the batteries hadn't died. "Eoland," I whispered. "You still with me?" A hand gripped mine, its texture shifting from rough bark to smooth scales and back again. "I'm here," came the reply, a chorus of voices layered atop each other. "But Sophia, I don't know how much longer I can hold on." The flashlight flickered to life, revealing Eoland's form. It was a swirling mass of shapes now, never settling on one for more than a second. Human, animal, plant, and things I had no name for, all blending together in a dizzying kaleidoscope. "Jesus," I breathed. "That poison really did a number on you, huh?" Eoland's laugh was a discordant mix of bird song and wolf howl. "You could say that. I can feel myself unraveling. If we don't find a way to stabilize me soon..." It didn't need to finish the thought. I swung the flashlight around, trying to get our bearings. We were in a vast cavern, its ceiling lost in darkness above us. Stalagmites rose from the floor like the teeth of some great subterranean beast. In the distance, I could hear the rush of underground water. "Okay," I said, more to steady myself than anything. "You said there was a way to help you. What is it?" Eolanda's form coalesced briefly into something vaguely humanoid, its eyes glowing like twin moons. "There's a place deep in these caves, a nexus of natural energy. If we can reach it, I might be able to purge the poison and regain control." I nodded, then realized Eoland might not be able to see it in its current state. "Right. Magic Cave Nexus. Why not? Any idea which way?" Before Eoland could answer, a voice echoed through the cavern, amplified and distorted by the rock walls. "Ms. Lawson, we know you're in here. There's nowhere left to run. Give up the creature and we can discuss terms." I recognized the voice, the granite-faced man who'd led the hunters. My grip tightened on the rifle. "Discuss terms, my ass," I muttered. Then louder, "How about you take your terms and shove them where the sun don't shine?" Eolanda's form rippled with what might have been amusement. "Your species has such colorful expressions." "Yeah, well, stick with me, kid. I'll teach you all the good ones." I swung the flashlight around again, searching for a way forward. "Any idea which way this nexus thing is?" Eolanda's body stretched out, becoming serpentine. It wove through the air, tasting it like a snake might. "This way," it said finally, pointing with a limb that was part tentacle, part branch. I can feel something, an echo of home. I didn't question it. At this point, a shapeshifter's intuition was as good a guide as any. We set off deeper into the cave, the sounds of pursuit growing fainter behind us. The journey was a nightmare of twisted ankles, scraped knees, and heart-stopping moments when my flashlight beam caught glimpses of things skittering just out of sight. More than once I had to help Eoland over difficult terrain, its form becoming less and less substantial with each passing minute. "So," I panted as we clambered over a fallen column, You want to tell me more about this old magic you think I have? Because I gotta say, I'm not feeling very magical right now. Aolan's laugh was weaker this time, barely more than a whisper of wind. It's there, Sophia. Dormant, perhaps, but present. Why else would you hear my call when no one else could? Why else would you see through my illusions? I snorted. Maybe I'm just crazy. That'd explain a lot. No, Aolanda said, its tone suddenly serious. You're special, Sophia. More than you know. Your ancestors, they were guardians, protectors of the balance between your world and ours. I nearly stumbled, caught off guard by this revelation. What? No, that's impossible. My family's been nothing but loggers and park rangers for generations. Aolanda's form shimmered, briefly taking on the appearance of an ancient, gnarled tree. And what better way to guard the wild places than to work among them? The old knowledge was lost, yes, but the instinct remained. The connection to the land, to the spirits that dwell within it. I opened my mouth to argue further, but a distant crash cut me off. The hunters were getting closer. We need to move faster, I said, pushing thoughts of magical legacies aside. Can you tell how much further? Aolan's response was cut off by a scream, not human, not animal, but something in between. It echoed through the cavern, raising the hair on the back of my neck. What the hell was that? I hissed, bringing the rifle up. Aolan's form contracted, becoming small and dense like a frightened hedgehog. Cave guardians, it whispered. Ancient spirits neither of your world nor mine. They don't take kindly to intruders. Great, because we didn't have enough problems already. We pressed on, the screams growing closer and more frequent. I tried to ignore the way the shadows seemed to move at the edge of my flashlight beam, the way eyes glinted in the darkness, only to vanish when I looked directly at them. Just when I thought my nerves couldn't take anymore, we rounded a corner and I saw it. A vast chamber easily the size of a football field. At its center stood a pillar of crystal, pulsing with soft, multicolored light. The air around it shimmered like a heat haze, and I could feel something. A vibration in my bones, a humming in my blood. The Nexus, Aolanda breathed, its voice filled with awe and relief. I stepped forward, drawn by an urge I couldn't explain, but before we could reach the crystal, a figure stepped out from behind it, blocking our path. It was the granite-faced man, but he looked wrong. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and his eyes glowed with an unnatural light. I'm impressed, Ms. Lawson, he said, his voice echoing strangely. You've led us on quite a chase, but it ends here. I raised the rifle, my hands steady despite the fear coursing through me. Stay back. I'm warning you. The man, if he could still be called that, laughed. It was a hollow sound, devoid of any real mirth. Oh, Sophia, if you only knew what you were really protecting, what that creature truly is. Aolanda's form solidified slightly, taking on a defensive posture. Don't listen to him, Sophia. He's been corrupted by forces he doesn't understand. The man's grin widened, revealing teeth that were just a bit too sharp. Understanding. Oh, I understand plenty. I understand that your kind has been manipulating humanity for millennia. I understand that you're a parasite, feeding off our world. He took a step forward, and I noticed others emerging from the shadows behind him. More hunters, all with that same otherworldly glow. Last chance, Ms. Lawson, the man said. Step aside. Let us do our job, and you can go back to your simple life. Protect this abomination, and, well... He shrugged, the gesture unnaturally fluid. Let's just say the fate that awaits you is beyond your worst nightmares. I glanced at Aoland, saw the fear and desperation in its ever-changing eyes. Then I looked back at the man, at the crystal pillar behind him, pulsing with ancient power. In that moment, I made my choice. You want nightmares? I snarled, raising the rifle. I'll show you nightmares. And with that, all hell broke loose in the Cavern of Echoes. The cavern erupted into chaos. The granite-faced man lunged forward with inhuman speed, his fingers elongating into wicked claws. I fired the rifle, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. The bullet struck him square in the chest, but instead of blood, a black ichor oozed from the wound. He laughed, a sound like grinding stones. "Oh, Sophia, did you really think your primitive weapons could harm us?" Yolanda's voice rang out behind me, a chorus of urgent whispers. "The crystal! We need to reach the crystal." I didn't need to be told twice. Ducking under the man's swipe, I made a break for the glowing pillar at the center of the cavern. Yolanda flowed beside me, its form a constantly shifting blur of shapes. The other hunters closed in, their bodies twisting and warping in ways that defied physics. One moment they were human, the next they were monstrous amalgamations of flesh and shadow. "What the hell are they?" I gasped, narrowly avoiding a tendril of darkness that lashed out from one of the creature's arms. Yolanda's voice was strained, its form flickering like a bad television signal. "Corrupted. The hunters. They tried to harness our power to become like us. But they didn't understand. The energy twisted them, made them into this. Great. So we were dealing with shape-shifting government agents turned eldritch horrors. Just another Tuesday in the life of Sophia Lawson, former park ranger, current protector of interdimensional beings. We were almost to the crystal when a wall of shadows rose up before us. The granite-faced man stepped through, his form now more monster than human. "I tried to be reasonable," he growled, his voice a cacophony of different tones. "I offered you a way out. But now you'll share the fate of all who defy us." He reached for me with hands that were more like talons. I swung the rifle like a club, connecting with his head with a satisfying crunch. It barely slowed him down. "Yolande," I shouted. "A little help here." The shapeshifter surged forward, its body expanding into a shimmering barrier between us and the hunters. "I can't hold them for long," it strained. "The crystal, touch it." I lunged for the pillar, my fingers outstretched. The moment they made contact, a jolt of energy surged through me. It was like being struck by lightning and plunging into an icy lake at the same time. Every nerve in my body sang with a power I couldn't begin to comprehend. Images flashed through my mind. Ancient forests teeming with creatures of myth. Battles between beings of pure energy and shadow. A world where the line between reality and imagination blurred into non-existence. And through it all, a voice. My voice, but older, wiser, filled with the weight of eons. "Remember," it whispered. "Remember who you are." I gasped, my eyes flying open. The cavern had gone silent. The hunters stood frozen, their twisted forms caught mid-motion. Yolande hovered beside me, its body a swirling galaxy of colors and light. "Sophia," it breathed, awe evident in its tone. "Your eyes." I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the crystal. My eyes were glowing, pulsing with the same multicolored light as the pillar. "What's happening to me?" I whispered. The granite-faced man's voice cut through the stillness, no longer mocking, but filled with fear. "No, it's not possible. You're one of them." I turned to face him, feeling power thrumming through my veins. "One of what?" Yolanda's voice was reverent. "A guardian. A true guardian, awakened after centuries of dormancy." The knowledge flooded into me, as if a dam had broken in my mind. I saw my ancestors, keepers of the balance between worlds. I saw the gradual forgetting, the loss of our power as humanity turned away from the old magics. And I saw my role, the last of my line, destined to reawaken the ancient pact. I stepped toward the hunters, my body radiating light. "You've forgotten your purpose," I said, my voice echoing with power I didn't fully understand. "You were meant to protect, not destroy, to maintain the balance, not upset it." The granite-faced man snarled, but I could see the fear in his inhuman eyes. "We are the next step in evolution. We've transcended your limited understanding of reality." I shook my head, feeling a profound sadness for these twisted beings. No, you've become trapped between worlds, neither one thing nor the other. But it's not too late. I reached out, laying my hand on his chest. He tried to recoil, but my touch held him in place. I could feel the corruption within him, a writhing mass of stolen power and misused energy. "Let it go," I whispered. "Remember who you were." Light poured from my hand, enveloping the man. He screamed, a sound of both agony and release. The darkness seemed to leach out of him, dissipating into the air. When it was done, he collapsed to his knees, once again fully human. He looked up at me, tears streaming down his face. I remember. Oh God, what have we done? One by one, I approached the other hunters, cleansing them of the corruption that had twisted their bodies and minds. Some wept. Others stared in shocked silence as the weight of their actions settled upon them. When it was done, I turned to Eolanda. The shapeshifter's form had stabilized, settling into a being of pure light with vaguely humanoid features. "You knew," I said. It wasn't a question. "You knew what I was." Eolanda nodded, its voice a symphony of tones. "I suspected, but the awakening had to be your choice. You had to face the darkness and choose the light of your own free will." I laughed, the sound echoing through the cavern. "Some choice. It was either this or get eaten by shadow monsters." "There is always a choice, Sophia," Eolan said softly. "Many in your position have chosen power for its own sake, becoming tyrants or losing themselves to the energy. You chose to heal, to restore balance. That is the mark of a true guardian." I looked around the cavern, at the former hunters struggling to come to terms with their restored humanity, at the crystal pillar still pulsing with ancient power. "So what now? Do I get a rulebook or something? How to be an interdimensional guardian for dummies?" Eolan's laughter was like wind chimes in a summer breeze. "The path of a guardian is not found in books, but in the heart. You will learn, as your ancestors did before you. And I will be here to guide you, if you'll have me." I reached out, taking Eolan's hand. The contact sent a thrill of energy through me, a reminder of the vast, unknown world I was now a part of. "Well," I said, grinning despite the enormity of what lay ahead, "I guess my days of writing parking tickets are over." As if in response, a tremor ran through the cavern. Dust and small rocks rained down from the ceiling. Is that normal?" I asked, looking around nervously. Eolan's form pulsed with urgency. "The awakening of your power has destabilized the cavern. We need to leave now." I nodded, turning to the former hunters. "All right, people. Unless you want to be buried alive, it's time to move." As we raced through the twisting tunnels, the ground shaking beneath our feet, I couldn't help but laugh. 24 hours ago, my biggest concern had been filing reports on time. Now I was a newly awakened guardian of interdimensional balance, leading a group of reformed government agents out of a collapsing magical cavern. Life, I decided, was about to get a whole lot more interesting. The sun was rising over Shawnee National Forest as we emerged from the cave, coughing and covered in dust. The world looked different to me now, as if a veil had been lifted from my eyes. I could see the currents of energy flowing through the trees, the whispers of spirits in the wind. It was beautiful and terrifying all at once. "Everyone all right?" I called out, doing a quick head count of our ragtag group. The former hunters looked shell-shocked, their eyes wide and unfocused as they stumbled into the early morning light. Granite Face, whose real name I'd learned was Agent David Keller, approached me hesitantly. "Ms. Lawson, Sophia, I don't know how to begin to apologize for what we've done." I held up a hand, stopping him. "Save it, Keller. We've got bigger problems right now. Like explaining to your superiors why their top-secret hunting party has gone AWOL and turned into a bunch of New Age hippies." He paled at that, the reality of our situation sinking in. Oh God, the director. She'll have us all disappeared. Aoland, who had taken on the appearance of a tall, androgynous being with silvery skin, placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. Perhaps it's time for a different approach. The old ways of secrecy and conflict have led us here. Maybe it's time for openness, for dialogue. I snorted. Right, because the government is just going to welcome the idea of shapeshifters and interdimensional guardians with open arms. I can see the press conference now. Magic is real, folks, don't panic. You'd be surprised. A new voice chimed in. We all whirled around to see a petite woman with salt and pepper hair emerge from the tree line. Despite her small stature, she radiated an aura of authority that made even Keller straighten up. Director Hawthorne, he stammered. We can explain. The woman, Hawthorne, held up a hand, silencing him. Her sharp eyes scanned our group, lingering on Aoland and me. I think, she said slowly, that it's time we all had a long overdue conversation. An hour later, we were seated around a large table in a mobile command center that had been discreetly parked near the forest's edge. I nursed a cup of coffee, marveling at how surreal it felt to be doing something so mundane after everything that had happened. Director Hawthorne sat at the head of the table, her posture rigid but her eyes alert and curious. So, she said, breaking the tense silence. Let me see if I have this straight. Ms. Lawson here is the last in a line of mystical guardians, tasked with maintaining the balance between our world and others. Aoland is a shape-shifting being from one of these other realms, and my agents, in their misguided attempts to harness otherworldly power, nearly unleashed an interdimensional catastrophe. Does that about sum it up? I exchanged a glance with Aoland before nodding. That's the Cliff's Notes version, yeah. Hawthorne leaned back in her chair, a wry smile tugging at her lips. You know, when I took this job, I thought the strangest thing I'd have to deal with was UFO conspiracy theorists. I clearly aimed too low. Keller leaned forward, his face etched with guilt and urgency. Director, I take full responsibility for the actions of my team. We let our ambition and fear cloud our judgment. But what we've seen, what we've learned, it changes everything. Indeed it does, Agent Keller, Hawthorne agreed. She turned her piercing gaze to me. The question is, what do we do with this knowledge? Ms. Lawson, you've been thrust into a role you never asked for. What are your thoughts? I set down my coffee cup, choosing my words carefully. Honestly, I'm still trying to wrap my head around all of this, but I know one thing for certain. The old way of doing things, of treating anything different as a threat to be eliminated, it has to stop. We're all part of something bigger than we realized, and it's time we started acting like it. Aoland nodded, its form shimmering slightly with approval. For too long, our worlds have been separated by fear and misunderstanding. Perhaps this is an opportunity for a new beginning, a chance to bridge the divide. Hawthorne drummed her fingers on the table, her brow furrowed in thought. It won't be easy. There are powerful people who would prefer to keep this knowledge buried, who would see your kind as a threat to be controlled or eliminated. Let them try, I said, feeling that newfound power stirring within me. The lights in the command center flickered, responding to my emotions. I may be new to this whole Guardian thing, but I'm a quick learner, and I've got a feeling I'm not alone in this fight. As if on cue, the air in the center of the table began to shimmer. A figure materialized, an elderly woman with eyes that sparkled with ancient wisdom. Several agents reached for their weapons, but Hawthorne waved them down. Peace, the woman said, her voice echoing with power. I am Alara, emissary of the Council of Realms. We have watched these proceedings with great interest. I felt a jolt of recognition. This was the voice I had heard in the Crystal Cavern, the one that had awakened my dormant powers. Alara turned to me, a gentle smile on her face. Sophia Lawson, last of the Guardian bloodline. You stand at a crossroads, not just for yourself, but for all the realms. The balance has been disrupted for far too long. It is time for the veils between worlds to thin, for understanding to replace fear. She then addressed Hawthorne. Director, your organization has long sought to protect your realm from perceived threats. But true security can only come through cooperation and mutual understanding. The Council proposes an alliance, a sharing of knowledge and resources for the benefit of all. Hawthorne leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with interest. An intriguing proposal, Ilara, but I'm sure you understand that I can't make such a monumental decision unilaterally. There will need to be discussions, negotiations. Ilara nodded. Of course. But let this be the first step on a new path. Sophia will serve as our intermediary, a bridge between worlds. She will need training, support, and protection as she grows into her role. All eyes turned to me, and I felt the weight of expectation settling on my shoulders. No pressure or anything, I muttered. Iolande placed a comforting hand on my arm. You won't be alone, Sophia. I will stand with you, as will others who believe in this cause. I took a deep breath, looking around the table at the faces of humans and otherworldly beings alike. This was bigger than me, bigger than any of us. But maybe, just maybe, we could make a difference. All right, I said, squaring my shoulders. Where do we start? Ilara's form began to fade, but her voice lingered in the air. With understanding, Sophia. Always with understanding. The path ahead will not be easy, but it is necessary. Remember, in the space between worlds, in the balance of energies, that is where true magic resides. As her form disappeared completely, a hushed silence fell over the room. It was Keller who finally broke it, clearing his throat awkwardly. So, do we still have to file reports on all this? A ripple of laughter broke the tension, and even Hawthorne cracked a smile. Oh, Agent Keller, she said, shaking her head. I have a feeling our paperwork is about to get a lot more interesting. As the group began to discuss next steps and immediate concerns, I stepped outside the command center, needing a moment to process everything. The forest greeted me, alive with energy I could now see and feel. Iolande joined me, its form shimmering in the morning sunlight. Second thoughts? It asked gently. I laughed, running a hand through my hair. About 1 million of them. But you know what? I wouldn't change a thing. Well, maybe the part where we almost got eaten by shadow monsters. Could have done without that. Iolande's laughter was like wind through leaves. Life as a guardian is rarely dull, Sophia. But I believe you're up to the challenge. I looked out at the forest, at the world that had suddenly become so much bigger and stranger than I had ever imagined. A world that needed protecting, needed understanding, needed me. Yeah, I said softly. I think I am. As if in response, a surge of energy flowed through me, connecting me to the land, to the hidden realms beyond, to the delicate balance that held it all together. I had a long road ahead, full of challenges I couldn't even begin to imagine. But for the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. The adventure, it seemed, was just beginning. 3 months had passed since that fateful day in the cave, and my life had become a whirlwind of training, negotiations, and increasingly bizarre encounters. I stood at the edge of a shimmering portal in what used to be my living room, trying to remember when this sort of thing had started to feel normal. You ready for this? Iolande asked, its form today resembling a tall, willowy being with skin like polished obsidian. I snorted, adjusting the new uniform Director Hawthorne had insisted I wear. It was sleek, black, and supposedly designed to withstand interdimensional travel. I felt like a cut-rate superhero. Ready to potentially cause an international incident by revealing the existence of multiple realms to a UN subcommittee? Sure, why not? Just another Tuesday. Iolande's laughter rippled through the air like heat haze. Your humor in the face of cosmic revelations never ceases to amaze me, Sophia. Yeah, well, laugh it up, I grumbled. You're not the one who has to explain to a bunch of politicians why their worldview is about to get turned upside down. A new voice chimed in from behind us. That's why you've got backup, rookie. I turned to see Agent Keller, David, as he'd insisted I call him, stepping through my front door. The past few months had changed him. Gone was the granite-faced hard-ass, replaced by a man who looked like he was perpetually caught between wonder and existential crisis. "David," I nodded. "Glad you could make it. How are the others doing?" He shrugged, his eyes darting nervously to the portal. "As well as can be expected. Jensen's taken to meditation. Says it helps calm the residual energies. Martinez is writing poetry, if you can believe it. Bad poetry, but still." I couldn't help but grin. The former hunters were all dealing with their brush with otherworldly forces in their own ways. "And you? How are you holding up?" David ran a hand through his hair, which had started to go gray at the temples. "Oh, just trying to wrap my head around the fact that everything I thought I knew about reality was wrong. No big deal." "That's the spirit," I said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Now you ready to go blow some political minds?" He squared his shoulders, a hint of his old determination shining through. "Let's do this." Together, we stepped through the portal. The sensation was always disorienting, like being turned inside out and squeezed through a straw, all in the space of a heartbeat. When the world stopped spinning, we found ourselves in a large, windowless room deep beneath the UN building in New York. Director Hawthorne was already there, engaged in hushed conversation with a severe-looking woman I recognized as the UN Secretary General. They both looked up as we arrived, their expressions a mix of anticipation and apprehension. "Ah, Ms. Lawson," Hawthorne said, her tone clipped. "Right on time. I trust you're prepared for your presentation?" I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. In the months since our first meeting, Hawthorne had become something of a reluctant ally, but her penchant for understatement in the face of cosmic weirdness still grated on me. "Oh, sure," I said, unable to keep the sarcasm from my voice entirely. "Just another day at the office. Reveal the existence of multiple dimensions, shatter humanity's understanding of reality, maybe demonstrate some magic if there's time. No biggie." The Secretary General's eyebrows shot up, but I caught the hint of a smile tugging at her lips. "I appreciate your candor, Ms. Lawson. I suspect we'll need that directness in the coming days." Before I could respond, the doors at the far end of the room swung open. A group of men and women in expensive suits filed in, their faces a mix of curiosity, skepticism, and barely concealed impatience. "Ladies and gentlemen," the Secretary General addressed them as they took their seats, "thank you for agreeing to this unusual briefing. I assure you what you're about to hear and see will change your understanding of our world forever." She nodded to me, and suddenly all eyes were on the former park ranger turned interdimensional guardian. Great. No pressure. I stepped forward, feeling the weight of countless realms on my shoulders. "Good morning," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "My name is Sophia Lawson, and I'm here to tell you that everything you think you know about reality is just the tip of a very large, very strange iceberg." For the next hour, I laid it all out. Multiple dimensions, shape-shifting beings, the delicate balance between realms, and humanity's forgotten role in maintaining that balance. I demonstrated some of my newfound abilities, manipulating energy fields and briefly opening small portals to other worlds. The reactions ranged from slack-jawed awe to vehement denial. One portly gentleman from a country I won't name stood up, his face red with either rage or an impending stroke. "This is preposterous," he bellowed. "Some elaborate hoax. You expect us to believe in magic and monsters?" I sighed, sharing a weary glance with Aoland, who had maintained a discreet presence in the corner of the room. "Sir, with all due respect, whether you believe it or not doesn't change the reality of the situation. The veils between worlds are thinning. Incidents of interdimensional bleed-through are increasing. We can either work together to manage this transition, or we can bury our heads in the sand and wait for reality as we know it to come crashing down around our ears." Another delegate, a woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, leaned forward. "Let's say we believe you, Ms. Lawson. What exactly are you proposing?" I took a deep breath. This was the moment of truth, A new initiative. A global task force dedicated to managing interdimensional relations, staffed by individuals from all nations and realms. We need to pool our resources, our knowledge, to face what's coming. The room erupted into chaos. Shouting matches broke out in multiple languages, accusations of insanity and conspiracy flying left and right. I stood in the middle of it all, feeling the energy in the room swirling dangerously. "Enough!" I roared, my voice amplified by powers I was still learning to control. The lights flickered and a hush fell over the room as everyone turned to stare at me. In that moment of silence, a new voice spoke up, calm, measured, and undeniably inhuman. "Perhaps a demonstration is in order." All eyes turned to Eland as it stepped forward, its form shimmering and changing. Gone was the humanoid appearance, replaced by a being of pure light and energy, its true form revealed. The room collectively gasped. The angry delegate who had shouted earlier fell back into his chair, all color drained from his face. Eoland's voice echoed in all our minds. "I am Eoland, emissary of the Morphling race and ally to Sophia Lawson. We come in peace, seeking cooperation and understanding. The age of separation is ending. It is time for all sentient beings of all realms to come together." The silence that followed was deafening. I could practically hear the gears turning in everyone's heads, worldviews shattering and reforming in real time. It was David who broke the silence, stepping forward to stand beside me. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice steady, "I've seen things in the past few months that I never thought possible. Terrifying things, yes, but also wonders beyond imagination. We have a choice to make: face this new reality together, or let fear and ignorance tear us apart." The Secretary General nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving Eoland's radiant form. "I believe," she said carefully, "that we have much to discuss." As the room erupted into hushed, urgent conversations, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It wasn't a resolution, not by a long shot, but it was a start. Eoland's voice whispered in my mind. "Well done, Sophia. The first step is always the hardest." I allowed myself a small smile. "Yeah, well, don't celebrate yet. Something tells me the real work is just beginning." As if on cue, alarms began blaring throughout the building. Hawthorne's phone buzzed, and her face paled as she read the message. "We've got a situation," she announced grimly. "Major interdimensional incursion in downtown Manhattan. Multiple hostiles, unknown capabilities." I shared a look with David and Eoland. So much for easing the world into this new reality. "Well, folks," I said, cracking my knuckles as I felt the familiar surge of energy coursing through me. "Who's up for a field trip?" As we raced out of the room, leaving behind a group of shell-shocked diplomats, I couldn't help but think that Stephen King had it all wrong. Sometimes reality is stranger and more terrifying than fiction. The new normal, it seemed, was anything but normal, and I wouldn't have it any other way. The streets of Manhattan had become a war zone. David and his team focused on evacuation, herding civilians to safety. Eoland flitted from creature to creature, using its shape-shifting abilities to confuse and corral them. And me? I was everywhere at once, a whirlwind of newfound power. I transmuted concrete into quicksand to trap a rampaging behemoth. I opened micro-portals to redirect energy blasts back at their sources. With each passing moment, I felt myself growing stronger, more in tune with the cosmic forces at my command. But it wasn't enough. For every creature we subdued, two more seemed to take its place. The fabric of reality itself was starting to fray at the edges, the sky above Times Square taking on a sickly, swirling quality. "Sophia," Eolanda's voice rang in my mind. "The incursion point. We need to seal it." I followed its gaze to the heart of Times Square. There, hovering about 20 feet off the ground, was a tear in space itself. It pulsed with malevolent energy, spewing forth new horrors with each throb. "Right," I panted, already feeling the strain of prolonged power use. "Any ideas on how to close an interdimensional rift?" A new voice answered, smooth as silk and cold as ice. Oh, my dear, you don't close it, you expand it. The crowd of creatures parted, revealing a figure that made my blood run cold. He was tall, unnaturally so, dressed in an impeccable suit that seemed to absorb light. His face was handsome in a severe way, but his eyes were endless pits of swirling darkness. "Who the hell are you?" I demanded, channeling energy into my fists. The man smiled, revealing teeth that were just a bit too sharp. "I have many names in many realms, but you can call me Mr. Vale. And I must say, you've been making quite a nuisance of yourself, little guardian." Eolan's form flickered with what I recognized as fear. "It can't be. You were banished." Mr. Vale's laugh was like shattering glass. "Banished? Oh, you naive creature. I was merely waiting, watching as the realms grew complacent, as the old protections weakened. And now it's time for a new order." He gestured expansively, and the rift behind him pulsed violently. The sky seemed to crack, revealing glimpses of other worlds, other realities. "You see," Mr. Vale continued, his voice taking on a fevered edge, "the separation of realms is an aberration, a cosmic mistake. I'm simply putting things back the way they should be. All worlds, all realities, merged into one glorious chaos." I felt the blood drain from my face as the implications sank in. "You're insane. The collision of realms would destroy everything." Mr. Vale's smile widened. "Destroy? No, my dear. Transform. Evolve. Those strong enough will survive, will thrive in the new reality I'm creating." He extended a hand towards me, his eyes boring into mine. "Join me, Guardian. With your power, we could reshape existence itself." For a moment, just a moment, I felt the pull of his words, the promise of unlimited power, of remaking the world as I saw fit. But then I thought of the people we'd evacuated, of David and his team fighting to save lives, of Eoland and all the beings who called Earth home. "Yeah," I said, power crackling around me. "I'm gonna have to pass on that." Mr. Vale's face hardened. "Pity. I had such high hopes for you." What followed was a battle unlike anything I had experienced before. Mr. Vale was a force of nature, wielding the power of chaos itself. He hurled shards of fractured reality like daggers, opened micro-rifts to unleash eldritch horrors, and warped the very ground beneath our feet. I countered with everything I had, drawing on every scrap of training and instinct. I wove shields of pure energy, redirected his attacks through hastily constructed portals, and called upon the fundamental forces of our realm to fight back. The battle raged across Times Square, each blow reshaping the iconic landscape. Billboards melted and reformed, streets buckled and twisted, and the air itself seemed to scream in protest at the forces being unleashed. Through it all, I could hear David coordinating the evacuation, Eoland working to contain the other creatures, and the panicked cries of civilians caught in the crossfire. It only fueled my determination. As we fought, I began to notice something. Each time Mr. Vale used his powers, the rift pulsed and grew, and with each pulse he seemed to grow stronger. "The rift," I gasped to Eolanda during a brief lull. "It's feeding him somehow." Eolanda's form shimmered with understanding. "Of course. He's channeling the chaos energy of the colliding realms. We need to close it, cut off his power source." Easier said than done. Every time I tried to approach the rift, Mr. Vale was there, driving me back with attacks that bent reality itself. "You can't win, Guardian," he taunted, his form growing more monstrous with each passing moment. "I am the inevitable tide of chaos. You are merely a pebble on the shore." As I dodged another reality-warping blast, a crazy idea began to form. "Eoland," I called out, "I need you to trust me. When I give the signal, hit me with everything you've got." "Sophia, no." Eoland's voice was thick with concern. "The energy transfer could tear you apart." I managed a grim smile. "Yeah, well, beats the alternative." "David, Get ready to evacuate everyone within a 2-block radius. Mr. Vale's laughter echoed across the battlefield. Oh, this should be entertaining. A last desperate gambit? I met his gaze, feeling a calm settle over me. Something like that. With every ounce of strength I had left, I launched myself towards the rift. Mr. Vale, caught off guard by the suicidal move, barely managed to deflect me. But that was okay. I wasn't aiming for him. I plunged into the heart of the interdimensional tear, feeling reality itself trying to rip me apart. The pain was beyond anything I could have imagined. "Now!" I screamed. I felt rather than saw Yolanda's response. A torrent of pure energy slammed into me, using my body as a conduit. In that moment, I was connected to everything, every realm, every possibility. Mr. Vale's face contorted in rage and disbelief. "No, what are you doing?" Through gritted teeth, I managed to smile. Bringing balance. With a scream that echoed across dimensions, I released every bit of power flowing through me. But instead of expanding the rift as Mr. Vale had done, I focused it inward, compressing the tear, forcing the colliding realities apart. The world went white, then black, then exploded into a kaleidoscope of impossible colors. I felt myself being torn apart and remade with each passing microsecond, and then, suddenly, silence. I found myself floating in a void, formless, weightless. In the distance, I could see pinpricks of light, other realms, other realities, once again separate and stable. A familiar voice echoed in the nothingness. Ilara, the emissary I had met months ago. "Well done, Sophia. You have restored the balance at great cost to yourself." I tried to speak but realized I no longer had a mouth, or a body for that matter. "Am I dead?" Ilara's laughter was like starlight. "Dead? No, child. Transformed. You have become something new, something necessary, a true guardian of the realms." Before I could process what that meant, I felt a pull. The void around me began to spin, reality reasserting itself. "Wait," I called out. "What about Mr. Vale? What about Earth?" Ilara's voice was already fading. "All in good time, Guardian. For now, rest. Your journey is far from over." The void collapsed, and I felt myself rushing back towards something. The last thing I heard before consciousness claimed me was Ilara's whisper. "Welcome to your new existence, Sophia Lawson. The realms have need of you." And then, once again, everything went dark. I awoke to the sound of beeping machines and hushed whispers. The sterile smell of disinfectant filled my nostrils, and for a moment I thought I was in a hospital. But as my eyes fluttered open, I realized how wrong I was. The room, if you could call it that, seemed to stretch infinitely in all directions. The walls, floor, and ceiling were a shimmering, ever-changing tapestry of colors and patterns that hurt my eyes if I looked at them for too long. Medical equipment from a dozen different technological eras surrounded my bed, some of it clearly not of Earth origin. "She's awake," a familiar voice said. David's face swam into view, looking older and more haggard than I remembered. "Sophia, can you hear me?" I tried to speak, but my throat felt like sandpaper. A straw was pressed to my lips, and I sipped gratefully. The liquid tasted like starlight in summer rain. "Where?" I managed to croak out. "The in-between," another voice answered. Yolande materialized beside my bed, its form a swirling vortex of energy. "A neutral space between realms. You've been here for quite some time." Alarm shot through me. I tried to sit up, but my body felt like lead. "How long?" David and Yolande exchanged a look that sent chills down my spine. "Sophia," David said gently, "you've been in a coma-like state for 3 years." The words hit me like a physical blow. 3 years? It felt like only moments had passed since my confrontation with Mr. Vale in Times Square. "What happened?" I demanded, my voice growing stronger. "The rift, the invasion. Did we stop it?" Yolande's form flickered, a gesture I'd come to recognize as discomfort. Yes and no. Your actions closed the main rift and banished Mr. Vale, for now. But the damage was done. The veils between realms have been irreparably thinned. David nodded grimly. Earth has changed, Sophia. The existence of other realms is public knowledge now. We couldn't keep it hidden after what happened in New York. My mind reeled, trying to process the implications. How bad is it? It's been challenging, David said, his voice heavy with understatement. There's been panic, riots, the collapse of some governments. But there's also been wonder, scientific breakthroughs, the beginnings of inter-realm cooperation. And the Guardians? I asked, remembering Alara's words before I lost consciousness. Aolandi's form brightened slightly. Growing in number, your actions awakened dormant abilities in others across multiple realms. They've been instrumental in maintaining some semblance of balance. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of responsibility settle back onto my shoulders. So what now? What's my role in all this? The air in the room seemed to thicken, and a new voice spoke, one I recognized from that liminal space between life and death. Now, Sophia Lawson, you truly begin your work as a guardian of the realms. Alara materialized at the foot of my bed, her ageless eyes filled with a mixture of compassion and steel resolve. The multiverse stands at a crossroads, she continued. The actions of Mr. Vale have set in motion events that cannot be undone. The boundaries between realms will continue to weaken. It is up to the Guardians to ensure that this convergence happens gradually, with minimal destruction. I pushed myself up, ignoring the protests of my atrophied muscles. And Mr. Vale? Is he still out there? Ilara's expression darkened. He was wounded by your confrontation, but not destroyed. He retreated to the darker corners of reality to lick his wounds and plot his return. Make no mistake, Sophia. He will be back, and he will be stronger. Great. No pressure or anything. So what's the plan? I asked, trying to inject some confidence into my voice. How do I get back up to speed? I'm guessing 3 years in a coma hasn't done wonders for my fighting form. David cleared his throat. About that, Sophia, your body, your physical form, it's changed. For the first time, I looked down at myself. What I saw nearly made me scream. My skin was translucent, shot through with veins of pulsing, multicolored energy. As I watched, my hand seemed to phase in and out of reality, becoming insubstantial before solidifying again. What happened to me? I whispered, horror and fascination warring in my voice. Alara stepped forward, her expression gentle. You have become something new, Sophia. A being of pure energy, capable of existing in multiple realms simultaneously. Your confrontation with Mr. Vale, your willingness to sacrifice yourself to seal the rift, it transformed you on a fundamental level. I stared at my shimmering hands, feeling a mixture of awe and terror. So what am I now? Human? Guardian? Something else entirely? You are the bridge, Aoland said, its voice filled with reverence. The living embodiment of the connection between realms. With proper training, you will be able to move between dimensions at will, to manipulate the very fabric of reality. David reached out, his hand passing through mine with a feeling like static electricity. I won't lie, Sophia. It's going to take some getting used to. For all of us. I laughed, a slightly hysterical edge to the sound. Yeah, no kidding. So what's step 1 in How to Be an Interdimensional Energy Being for Dummies? Ilara's lips quirked in a small smile. First, we stabilize your form. Then we begin your true training. The multiverse is vast, Sophia, and there is much you need to learn if you are to help guide it through the coming convergence. Over the next few weeks, or what passed for weeks in this timeless space, I underwent the strangest physical therapy imaginable. I learned to control my new energy form, to solidify at will, to project my consciousness across dimensional boundaries. It wasn't easy. There were moments of frustration so intense that I accidentally phased through the floor of my room, ending up in what looked like a prehistoric jungle. Another time, a burst of uncontrolled energy created a temporary rift to a realm of living shadow, causing a minor panic among the facility's staff. But slowly, surely, I began to master my new abilities. And with that mastery came understanding and fear. I could sense the multiverse now, could feel the trillions upon trillions of realities all pulsing with life and possibility. And I could feel the strain on the barriers between those realities, the slow but inexorable push towards convergence. It's overwhelming, I confessed to Yolande one night, as we stood on a balcony overlooking a sea of swirling dimensional energy. How am I supposed to protect all of this? I'm just one person. Yolande's form shimmered with sympathy. You are not alone, Sophia. The Guardians grow in number every day, and you have allies across the realms, beings who understand the importance of maintaining the balance. I nodded, trying to take comfort in that. But a nagging doubt still gnawed at me. And what about Earth? My home? How are they coping with all of this? Yolande was quiet for a long moment. It has been difficult. The sudden knowledge of other realms, of beings beyond human comprehension. It has shaken the foundations of every society on your planet. There have been conflicts, yes, but also incredible advancements. Your people are adaptable, Sophia. They are learning to navigate this new reality. I thought of my old life, my cabin in the woods, my job as a park ranger. It all seemed so small now, so insignificant in the face of the cosmic drama unfolding around us. I want to see it, I said suddenly, surprising myself with the intensity of my desire. Earth, I need to see what's changed, what I'm fighting for. Yolande's form pulsed with concern. Are you sure you're ready? Your control over your new form is still... I'm ready, I interrupted, feeling a surge of determination. I need this, Yolande. I need to remember why all of this matters. After some discussion, and no small amount of arguing, with Alara and the other overseers of my recovery, it was agreed. I would make a brief, supervised visit to Earth, specifically to the place where it all began, Shawnee National Forest. The journey between realms was simultaneously instantaneous and eternal. One moment I was in the in-between, the next I was standing on a familiar trail, the scent of pine and wild herbs filling my nostrils. But the forest I remembered was changed. The trees seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly light, their leaves occasionally phasing out of normal space-time. Strange flowers bloomed alongside the path, their petals opening to reveal tiny galaxies within. And there, in a clearing that had once been empty, stood a structure that took my breath away. It was a building, but like no building I had ever seen. Its architecture seemed to defy Euclidean geometry, its walls shifting and changing as I watched. A sign out front read, Interdimensional Ecology Research Station. It's something, isn't it? I turned to see David walking up the path, a wry smile on his face. He looked older, with more gray in his hair, but his eyes were bright with a newfound purpose. David, I breathed, fighting the urge to hug him. I was still unsure of how my energy form would interact with solid matter. It's good to see you. He nodded, his eyes taking in my shimmering form. You too, Sophia. You're looking... radiant. I groaned at the pun, feeling a surge of affection for my old friend. Seriously? 3 years, and that's the best you've got? David's laugh was warm and genuine. What can I say? Some things never change. His expression sobered. But a lot of things have. Come on, let me show you around. You've got a lot to catch up on. As we walked towards the research station, David filled me in on the changes of the past 3 years. The good, unprecedented scientific advancements, the beginnings of clean interdimensional energy sources, diplomatic relations with beings from other realms. And the bad, extremist groups calling for isolation from other dimensions, black market trading in otherworldly artifacts, the ongoing threat of incursions from less friendly realms. "It's a whole new world, Sophia," David said as we reached the entrance to the station. "But we're adapting. Humanity is nothing if not resilient." I nodded, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. Pride in my species' ability to adapt, sorrow for the world that was lost, and a renewed determination to protect this new reality. As we stepped into the research station, alarms suddenly began blaring. A voice I recognized as Eoland's echoed through hidden speakers. "Alert! Major interdimensional incursion detected in downtown Chicago. All available Guardians report immediately." David and I shared a look. He raised an eyebrow. "So, Guardian of the Realms, you up for saving the world again?" I felt a smile spread across my face, my body already beginning to phase in preparation for interdimensional travel. "Always," I said. "Let's go to work." As we rushed towards the coordinates of the incursion, I felt a sense of purpose settle over me. The multiverse was vast, the challenges ahead enormous. But I was no longer just Sophia Lawson, park ranger. I was a guardian of the realms, a protector of the cosmic balance, and I was ready to face whatever came next. The air crackled with tension as Thompson and his men burst into the sacred grounds of the Native American reservation. Their heavy boots trampled the delicate wildflowers that had moments ago swayed peacefully in the breeze. I stood beside Eoland, my hand instinctively reaching for hers as we faced the intruders. Eoland's eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, her small frame vibrating with newfound energy from communing with the ancient power sources. She squeezed my hand, her voice resonating in my mind. "Stay close to me. This ends today." Thompson's cold eyes locked onto Eoland, a triumphant smirk playing on his lips. Well, looks like our little game of hide-and-seek is finally over. Come quietly, and we might just let your human pet live." I stepped forward, rage boiling in my veins. "You're not taking her anywhere, you bastard." A deep, gravelly voice cut through the tension. "These lands are sacred. You have no power here." Chief Stonebear, the eldest of the tribal elders, emerged from his tent, his weathered face set in grim determination. Thompson chuckled, the sound devoid of any real mirth. "I'm afraid your ancient superstitions won't protect you, old man. This is a matter of national security." Without warning, Eoland launched into action. Her form blurred and shifted, taking on the appearance of a majestic eagle. She soared into the air, her piercing cry echoing across the reservation. The soldiers raised their weapons, but before they could fire, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble. Chief Stonebear raised his arms to the sky, chanting in his native tongue. The other elders joined him, their voices rising in a haunting chorus. To my amazement, spectral forms began to materialize around us, the spirits of their ancestors, awakened to defend their land. "What the hell?" one of Thompson's men cried out, his rifle shaking in his hands. Thompson's composure cracked for a moment before he barked out orders. "Don't just stand there, you idiots. Take them down." Chaos erupted as the soldiers opened fire. I dove for cover behind a large boulder, my heart pounding in my chest. The air filled with the acrid smell of gunpowder and the otherworldly energy emanating from the tribal elders. Eoland swooped down, her talons raking across the face of a soldier who had taken aim at Chief Stonebear. She shifted again, this time into a massive bear, roaring as she swatted away guns and sent men flying. I emerged from my hiding spot, searching for a way to help. A soldier spotted me and raised his weapon. Time seemed to slow as I saw his finger tighten on the trigger. Suddenly, a shimmering barrier appeared before me, deflecting the bullet. I turned to see one of the younger elders, her hands outstretched and glowing with power. "Thank you," I gasped. She nodded grimly. "Protect Eoland. She is the key to all of this." I scanned the battlefield, spotting Eoland locked in combat with Thompson. She had taken on her childlike form again, but her movements were anything but childish. She dodged and weaved with inhuman grace, her hands leaving trails of shimmering energy in their wake. You can't win this, Aoland, Thompson growled, barely avoiding a blast of energy. Even if you defeat me, there will always be others. You'll never be safe. Eoland's voice rang out, clear and defiant. I'm not fighting for my safety, Thompson. I'm fighting for a world where no one has to hide who they are. As I made my way towards them, a searing pain exploded in my shoulder. I stumbled, looking down to see blood blossoming across my shirt. One of Thompson's men had gotten lucky. No! Eoland's anguished cry pierced the air. She turned towards me, her momentary distraction giving Thompson the opening he needed. He produced a strange, glowing device from his pocket and lunged at Eoland. It's over! He shouted triumphantly. Everything that happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Chief Stonebear leapt between Thompson and Eoland, taking the full brunt of the device. A blinding flash of light erupted, and when it faded, the old chief lay motionless on the ground. Grandfather, one of the younger elders cried out in anguish. Eolanda's eyes blazed with fury. She let out a primal scream, and the very air around us seemed to vibrate with power. The earth split open beneath Thompson's feet, spectral hands reaching up to drag him down. This isn't over, Thompson shouted as he disappeared into the chasm, which sealed itself as quickly as it had opened. With their leader gone, the remaining soldiers quickly surrendered. The tribal elders surrounded them, using their powers to bind them with ethereal chains. I stumbled towards Aoland, my vision blurring from blood loss. She caught me as I fell, her small arms surprisingly strong. Hold on, she whispered, her cool hand pressing against my wound. I felt a strange tingling sensation, and the pain began to subside. Eoland, I murmured, fighting to stay conscious. Are you okay? She smiled sadly, tears glistening in her eyes. I'm fine, but the cost was too high. We both looked over at Chief Stonebear's still form. The other elders had gathered around him, their mournful chants filling the air. He knew the risks, one of the elders said, approaching us. Our legends spoke of this day, when the last morphling would return, and a great sacrifice would be made to secure the future. Aoland's voice trembled as she spoke. I never wanted anyone to die for me. The elder placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. It was his choice, little one. And now, it's time for you to fulfill your destiny. Aoland looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and determination. I have to go, she said softly. Panic gripped my heart. Go? What do you mean? We won, didn't we? She shook her head. This was just one battle. The war is far from over. Thompson was right about one thing. There will always be others who fear what they don't understand. I need to make sure that what happened here today never happens again. Then I'll come with you, I insisted, trying to stand despite my weakened state. Aoland gently pushed me back down. No, my friend. Your path lies here. You must tell our story. Help bridge the gap between humans and those they see as others. Tears stung my eyes as the reality of the situation sank in. Will I ever see you again? She smiled, a hint of mischief in her eyes despite the gravity of the moment. The future is never certain, but our paths are intertwined now. Trust in that. With one last embrace, Aoland stepped back. Her form began to shimmer and fade, becoming one with the ethereal energies that still lingered in the air. Goodbye, for now. Her voice echoed in my mind as she disappeared completely. As the tribal elders helped me to my feet, I gazed out at the battlefield, now eerily quiet. The weight of all that had happened, and all that was yet to come, settled on my shoulders. Aoland was gone, but her mission lived on through me. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the challenges ahead. The war wasn't over, but thanks to Aolanda's sacrifice, we now had a fighting chance. I woke up screaming, my throat raw, the acrid taste of bile burning the back of my tongue. The tribal healing hut swam into focus, its earthen walls seeming to pulse in the dim light of a single oil lamp. My body felt like it had been put through a meat grinder, every nerve ending screaming in protest as I tried to sit up. Easy there, outsider, a gravelly voice said from the shadows. "You've been to hell and back." I squinted, making out the weathered face of Running Bear, one of the younger tribal elders. He looked like he'd aged a decade in the few days I'd been out. "Eolanda," I croaked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Where is she?" Running Bear's face fell, and my heart sank with it. He didn't need to say the words, but he did anyway. "She's gone, my friend. Sacrificed herself to save us all." The memories came flooding back in a torrent of pain and anguish. The battle, the blood, the blinding light as Eolanda unleashed her full power. And then, nothing. "No," I muttered, shaking my head in denial. "No, she can't be gone. She's a morphling, for Christ's sake. She can't just die." Running Bear placed a gnarled hand on my shoulder. "Death comes for us all, even the most extraordinary among us. Eolanda knew the price she would have to pay to protect both our worlds." I slumped back onto the pallet, my mind reeling. How could she be gone? After everything we'd been through, all the narrow escapes and impossible odds we'd overcome, how could it end like this? "What happened?" I asked, needing to know but dreading the answer. Running Bear sighed, settling himself on a low stool beside my bed. "After you were shot, Eolanda changed. It was like all the power of the ancients flowed through her at once. She became something beyond morphling, beyond human understanding. She tore through Thompson's men like they were made of paper, but the energy was too much for her physical form to contain." He paused, his eyes distant, reliving the memory. "In the end, she turned that power inward, using it to seal the rift between our world and the hidden realms. The backlash obliterated what was left of the government's forces, but it also unmade her." I closed my eyes, hot tears leaking from beneath my lids. "And Thompson?" "Vanished," Running Bear spat. "Like the coward he is. But his organization lies in ruins, their secrets exposed to the world." A hollow victory, I thought bitterly. What good was winning if Eolanda wasn't here to see it? Days passed in a haze of grief and pain. The tribe tended to my physical wounds, but the gaping hole in my chest where Eolanda had been seemed beyond healing. I drifted in and out of consciousness, haunted by vivid dreams of shape-shifting shadows and echoing cries that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was during one of these fevered nightmares that I first heard her voice. "Wake up, sleepyhead." Eolanda's childlike giggle rang in my ears. "There's work to be done." I jolted awake, my heart racing. The healing hut was empty, moonlight streaming through the smoke hole in the roof. Had it just been another dream? Not a dream. Eolanda's voice whispered, seeming to come from inside my own head. "I'm here but not here. Everywhere and nowhere. It's confusing." "Eolanda," I breathed, afraid to hope. "Is it really you?" A shimmer of light coalesced beside my bed, taking on the vague outline of a small, familiar form. "In a manner of speaking," she replied, her voice tinged with sadness. "I'm not truly alive, not in the way you understand it. But I'm not gone either. A part of me lives on in you, in the connection we forged." I reached out, my hand passing through her ghostly form. "I don't understand," I said, frustration and grief warring within me. "Neither do I. Not completely," Eolanda admitted. "But I know that my sacrifice wasn't the end. It was a beginning, the start of something bigger than both of us." She gestured towards the hut's entrance. "Go outside. See what I've set in motion." Confused but desperate for answers, I stumbled to my feet and pushed aside the deerskin flap covering the doorway. What I saw took my breath away. The night sky was alive with shimmering lights, like the aurora borealis painted in impossible colors. But these weren't just pretty lights. They were moving with purpose, coalescing into recognizable shapes before dissolving and reforming elsewhere. "My God," I whispered. "What is this?" Aolan's spectral form appeared beside me. The veil between worlds is thinning, she explained. My sacrifice weakened the barriers that have kept the hidden realm separate for millennia. Now, the extraordinary creatures of myth and legend are beginning to bleed through into your reality. I watched in awe as a flock of what could only be described as phoenixes soared overhead, their fiery feathers leaving trails of sparks in the night sky. In the distance, I could have sworn I saw the massive serpentine form of a dragon coiling through the clouds. This is incredible, I breathed. But won't this cause panic? The world isn't ready for this kind of revelation. Aolan's ghostly hand passed through mine, leaving a tingling sensation in its wake. That's where you come in, my friend. The world needs someone to guide them through this transition, someone who understands both sides of the veil. I shook my head, overwhelmed by the implications. Me? I'm nobody. Just a forest ranger who got caught up in something way bigger than himself. You're selling yourself short, Aolan chided gently. You have a strength in you that you've only begun to tap into. And now, with our connection, you have abilities that no other human possesses. As if on cue, I felt a strange, tingling sensation spreading through my body. I looked down at my hands, watching in shock as they seemed to shimmer and blur, my fingers elongating into claws before snapping back to their normal shape. Holy shit, I gasped. Am I turning into a morphling? Aolanda's laughter echoed in my mind. Not quite, but you've inherited a fraction of my power, enough to bridge the gap between humans and the creatures of the hidden realms. The magnitude of what she was saying began to sink in. You want me to be some kind of ambassador? A mediator between two worlds? More than that, Aoland replied, her form growing fainter as she spoke. I want you to be a protector. The merging of our worlds won't be smooth or easy. There are those who will resist, who will see the extraordinary as a threat to be eliminated. I thought of Thompson and his shadowy organization, of the fear and hatred that had driven them to hunt Aoland and her kind to near extinction. Like the men who were after you, I said grimly. Yolanda nodded, her outline now barely visible in the moonlight. Exactly. Thompson may be gone, but there are others like him out there. People who fear what they don't understand, who will stop at nothing to maintain their version of normalcy. I clenched my fists, feeling the power thrumming beneath my skin. I won't let them win, I vowed. I'll protect the innocents on both sides, human and not. I know you will. Aolan's voice was fading now, little more than a whisper on the wind. But be careful. The power you've inherited is a double-edged sword. Use it wisely, or it may consume you. With those ominous words, her presence vanished entirely, leaving me alone beneath the shimmering sky. But I knew I wasn't truly alone. Not anymore. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. News of the supernatural incursions spread like wildfire, causing equal parts wonder and panic across the globe. I found myself thrust into the role of reluctant spokesperson, using my first-hand experience with Aoland to try and calm fears and promote understanding. It wasn't easy. For every person who embraced the idea of a world filled with magic and mystery, there were a dozen others who reacted with fear and suspicion. Hate groups sprang up overnight, their rhetoric filled with calls to purge the alien menace and reclaim our world. I stood before a sea of reporters, their cameras flashing like strobe lights as I tried to explain the unexplainable. These beings aren't invaders, I insisted, my voice carrying across the crowded press room. They're refugees fleeing a dying realm. They're just as scared and confused as we are. But how can we trust them? A belligerent voice called out from the back. How do we know they won't try to take over to replace us? I took a deep breath, feeling Aolan's power stirring within me. In a move that would later be replayed on news channels around the world, I allowed my form to blur and shift, taking on aspects of various creatures, the wings of an eagle, the eyes of a wolf, the scaled skin of a dragon, before settling back into my human shape. The room erupted in gasps and shouts, cameras clicking furiously. "Because I am both human and other," I said into the stunned silence that followed. "And I swear to you on everything I hold dear, that coexistence is not only possible but necessary for the survival of both our kinds." As I stepped down from the podium, my phone buzzed with an incoming text. It was from an unknown number, but the message sent a chill down my spine. "You can't protect them all, freak. We're coming for you and every other abomination that crawled out of the woodwork. This is our world, and we're taking it back." I stared at the screen, a grim smile playing across my lips. Let them come, I thought. I faced down government agents, mythical creatures, and my own transformation. Whatever this new threat was, I'd be ready. For Eolanda. For the future she sacrificed herself to create. For a world where the extraordinary and the ordinary could live side by side. The war had only just begun, and I was ready to fight. The first tremor hit while I was in the middle of a press conference, trying to explain to a room full of skeptical reporters why they shouldn't be afraid of the griffins nesting on top of the Empire State Building. "Look, they're just looking for a safe place to raise their young," I was saying when the floor beneath my feet suddenly lurched. Coffee cups rattled on the table in front of me, and a few of the reporters let out startled yelps. "It's okay," I said, raising my hands in what I hoped was a calming gesture. "Just a little shake. Nothing to worry about." But even as the words left my mouth, I felt a chill run down my spine. This wasn't just a random tremor. Something was coming. The second quake hit harder, sending chairs skidding across the floor and toppling the podium I'd been standing behind. As the panicked reporters scrambled for the exits, I closed my eyes and reached out with the strange new senses I'd inherited from Eoland. The world fell away, and suddenly I was aware of vast, hollow spaces beneath the city. Miles of tunnels and caverns, stretching out in all directions like the veins of some colossal beast. And in those spaces, something was stirring. "Ah, shit," I muttered, opening my eyes to find the room empty save for a single, wild-eyed intern clutching a notepad like a lifeline. "What's happening?" she stammered, her knuckles white around her pen. I sighed, already feeling the familiar tingle of transformation creeping along my skin. "Something big. You might want to get out of here." She didn't need to be told twice, bolting for the door as my body began to shift and change. By the time the third tremor hit, rattling the windows in their frames, I was no longer fully human. My body had grown larger, more muscular, my skin taking on a thick, leathery texture. Claws sprouted from my fingertips, and I could feel a pair of membranous wings unfurling from my back. Not quite dragon, not quite man, but something in between. "All right," I growled, my voice deeper and more resonant in this form. "Let's go see what all the fuss is about." I burst through the window in a shower of glass, spreading my wings to catch the updraft between the towering skyscrapers. The city below was in chaos, streets gridlocked with panicked drivers trying to flee while others stood gawking at the sky. I wasn't the only otherworldly being taking to the air. All around me, creatures of myth and legend were emerging from their hiding places, drawn by the same primal instinct that had set my nerves on edge. A flock of harpies swooped past, their feathers gleaming in the late afternoon sun. A chimera lumbered along the rooftops, all three of its heads swiveling to track my movement. In the distance, I could see the griffins taking flight from their Empire State Building eyrie, screeching in alarm. But it wasn't until I saw the cracks spreading across the pavement below that I realized the true scale of what we were dealing with. "Oh, you have got to be kidding me," I muttered as the asphalt split open, revealing yawning chasms that stretched down into impenetrable darkness. From those chasms emerged things, pale, twisted forms that moved with an unsettling, undulating grace. Some were vaguely humanoid, while others defied description, a jumble of tentacles and eyes and grasping appendages. The creatures from below had awakened, and they were hungry. I dove towards the nearest group of panicked civilians, snatching up a woman who had tripped and fallen just as one of the pale monstrosities lunged for her. She screamed as my claws closed around her waist, but it was a better fate than the one that awaited her on the ground. "Statue of Liberty?" I shouted as I deposited her on a nearby rooftop. "Tell everyone you can to head for Liberty Island. It's the safest place right now." She nodded dumbly, still too shocked to speak, and I took off again, scanning the streets for more people in need of evacuation. For hours, I flew back and forth across the city, rescuing who I could and directing others towards safety. I wasn't alone in my efforts. Other flying creatures joined in, from Pegasi to giant eagles, ferrying humans to the relative safety of Liberty Island. But for every person we saved, it seemed like a dozen more fell victim to the pale horrors swarming out of the ground. Their agonized screams filled the air, mixing with the inhuman shrieks and gibbering of their attackers. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the ravaged cityscape, I finally allowed myself to land on the torch of the Statue of Liberty. My wings ached, my transformed body pushed to its limits. "This is bad," a familiar voice said from beside me. I turned to see Zephyr, one of the harpies I'd befriended in the weeks since the merging of our worlds. Her usually immaculate feathers were ruffled and stained with what I hoped was just mud. "You don't say," I replied dryly, surveying the chaos below. Fires had broken out across Manhattan, sending plumes of acrid smoke into the darkening sky. The pale creatures seemed to be everywhere, their numbers still swelling as more poured out of the ground. "Any idea what these things are?" I asked, flexing my claws in anticipation of the fight to come. Zephyr shook her head, her golden eyes wide with fear. "Nothing like this exists in any of the realms I know. They're wrong. Like they don't belong in this reality at all." A chill ran down my spine at her words. "Great. So we're dealing with interdimensional horrors. Any suggestions?" Before she could answer, a deafening roar split the air. We both turned to see a massive shape rising from the waters of the harbor. At first, I thought it was some kind of sea serpent, but as it reared up, I realized it was something far stranger. It was a city. An entire city, rising from the depths like some nightmarish inverted skyscraper. Its architecture was all wrong, full of impossible angles and structures that hurt the eyes to look at directly. And crawling all over its surface were more of the pale, twisted creatures. "Oh, fuck me," I breathed, my mind reeling at the implications. This wasn't just an invasion. It was a collision of worlds. Zephyr grabbed my arm, her talons digging into my leathery skin. "We need to go now, before it's too late." I shook my head, my resolve hardening. "No, we can't abandon all these people. There has to be a way to stop this." As if in response to my words, I felt a familiar presence stirring in the back of my mind. Yolanda's voice, faint but urgent. "The center," she whispered. "Find the center of the disturbance. That's where the barrier between worlds is weakest." I nodded, understanding what I had to do. "Zephyr, I need you to coordinate the evacuation. Get as many people off the island as you can. I'm going in." The harpy's eyes widened in alarm. "Are you insane? You'll be torn apart." I managed a grim smile, already feeling my body shifting again, taking on aspects better suited for the fight ahead. "Probably, but I'm the only one who stands a chance of closing this rift." Before she could protest further, I launched myself off the statue, wings spread wide as I soared towards the nightmare city rising from the harbor. The closer I got, the more my senses reeled. The very air seemed to warp and twist around the structure, and I could feel reality fraying at the edges. Voices whispered in languages never meant for human ears, promising power and knowledge beyond imagining. I gritted my teeth, pushing through the psychic assault. "Not interested," I growled, focusing on the task at hand. Landing on one of the less impossible-looking spires, I began to fight my way towards the center of the structure. The pale creatures swarmed me from all sides, their boneless limbs grasping and clawing. I lashed out with claws and teeth, my body constantly shifting to meet each new threat. One moment I had the strength of a bear, The next, the speed of a cheetah. Venom dripped from fangs I hadn't possessed seconds before, melting through the pallid flesh of my attackers. But for every creature I struck down, 3 more took its place. I was being overwhelmed, driven back step by step. Just when I thought I couldn't go on, a familiar voice cut through the madness. "Need a hand, freak?" I turned to see a figure in black tactical gear, wielding what looked like a heavily modified flamethrower. It was Thompson, the government agent who had hunted Eoland and me across the country. "You've got to be shitting me," I snarled, barely ducking a swipe from a tentacled monstrosity. "Come to finish the job?" Thompson grinned, torching a group of pale horrors that had been creeping up behind me. "Are you kidding? This is way above my pay grade. Figured I'd throw in with the devil I know." I didn't have time to question his sudden change of heart. "Fine. Cover me. I need to get to the center of this thing." Together, we fought our way deeper into the Nightmare City. Thompson's weapons and training complemented my shape-shifting abilities, and slowly but surely, we made progress. Finally, we reached what could only be described as the heart of the structure. A vast, pulsing mass of something that hurt to look at directly. "Now what?" Thompson shouted over the cacophony of shrieks and otherworldly howls. I closed my eyes, reaching out with the power Eoland had left me. I could feel the rift now, a tear in the fabric of reality itself. "Now," I said, my voice resonating with power that wasn't entirely my own. "We close it." I plunged my hands into the pulsing mass, feeling reality itself twist and warp around me. The pain was indescribable, like every atom of my being was being torn apart and reassembled. Through it all, I held on to one thought. This ends now. With a sound like the universe itself tearing in two, the rift began to close. The Nightmare City shuddered and started to collapse in on itself, taking its pale horrors with it. The last thing I remember is Thompson's voice, fading into the distance as the world went dark around me. "You did it, you crazy son of a bitch. You actually did it." Then, nothing but blessed silence. I came to with a mouthful of ash and the taste of copper on my tongue. Every inch of my body screamed in protest as I tried to move, my muscles feeling like they'd been put through a meat grinder and reassembled by a drunk taxidermist. "Easy there, hero," a gruff voice said from somewhere to my left. "You've been out for a while." I blinked, trying to focus on the blurry shape looming over me. Slowly, Thompson's face came into view, looking like it had aged a decade since I'd last seen him. "How?" I croaked, my throat raw and parched. "How long?" Thompson handed me a bottle of water, which I gulped down greedily. 3 weeks, he said, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. "We weren't sure you were going to make it." As the cobwebs cleared from my mind, the memories came flooding back. The Nightmare City rising from the harbor, the pale, twisted creatures swarming out of the ground, the rift. I sat up abruptly, ignoring the protest from my battered body. "The rift, did we close it? Is it over?" Thompson's face grew somber. "Yes and no," he said, gesturing for me to follow him. On unsteady legs, I made my way to the window of what I now realized was a high-rise apartment. The view that greeted me stole what little breath I had left. New York City lay in ruins. Entire blocks had been reduced to rubble, while others seemed to have been twisted and warped into impossible shapes. The sky above was a sickly green, roiling with clouds that pulsed with an otherworldly light. And everywhere I looked, I saw them. Creatures of myth and legend, no longer hiding in the shadows but walking openly among the devastation. A minotaur helped clear debris from a collapsed building. A group of pixies flitted between makeshift shelters, delivering supplies. In the distance, I could see the massive form of a dragon curled protectively around what looked like a refugee camp. "What the hell happened?" I whispered, unable to tear my eyes away from the scene. Thompson sighed heavily. "You closed the rift all right, but the damage was already done. Reality fractured. The boundaries between worlds are thinner than ever." We're calling it the Great Merging. I turned to face him, noting for the first time the dark circles under his eyes and the new streaks of gray in his hair. And the government? Your organization? A bitter laugh escaped his lips. Gone. Swept away in the chaos. Turns out, when faced with eldritch horrors from beyond space and time, petty human power structures don't mean much. I nodded slowly, processing this new reality. So why are you here? Last I checked, you wanted me dead or dissected. Thompson's eyes hardened. Because, like it or not, you're our best hope for navigating this new world. You're the only one who can bridge the gap between humans and everything else. As if on cue, I felt a familiar tingling sensation creeping along my skin. I looked down to see my hand shifting, fingers elongating into claws before morphing back to human form. Neat trick, Thompson said, eyeing me warily. How much control do you have over that? I flexed my fingers, concentrating on maintaining my human shape. Some. It's getting easier, but sometimes it has a mind of its own. A commotion outside drew our attention back to the window. A crowd had gathered in the street below, a mix of humans and otherworldly beings. They were pointing up at the building, their voices a jumbled cacophony of excitement and fear. Word's gotten out that you're awake, Thompson explained. They're calling you the Rift Walker. Some even think you're some kind of messiah. I groaned, running a hand through my tangled hair. Great. Just what I need. A cult following. Thompson's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. Better than a lynch mob. Come on, you should probably say something before they tear the building apart. Reluctantly, I followed him down to the lobby. As we stepped outside, the crowd fell silent, all eyes fixed on me. I could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down, threatening to suffocate me. Taking a deep breath, I stepped forward. I'm not a messiah, I began, my voice carrying across the hushed gathering. I'm just a guy who got caught up in something bigger than himself. But I promise you this. I will do everything in my power to help us all navigate this new world we find ourselves in. A murmur ran through the crowd. From the back, a voice called out, "But how can we trust them?" A gnarled finger pointed accusingly at a group of satyrs standing nearby. They're not human. I felt a surge of anger rising within me, and with it, the stirring of Aolanda's power. Before I could stop it, my form began to shift. Wings sprouted from my back, scales rippling across my skin. Gasps and cries of alarm echoed through the crowd. Neither am I growled, my voice deepened and resonant. Not entirely. And yet I stand before you, fighting for the survival of both humans and non-humans alike. We're all in this together now. The sooner we accept that, the better chance we have of surviving. As my words sank in, I saw fear and suspicion give way to cautious hope on many faces. But not all. I could see the seeds of conflict already taking root, the lines being drawn between those who embraced this new reality and those who feared it. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into the work of rebuilding and reconciliation. It wasn't easy. For every step forward, it seemed like we took 2 steps back. Old prejudices died hard, and new ones sprang up to take their place. One particularly tense afternoon found me mediating a dispute between a group of human survivors and a clan of trolls who had taken up residence in Central Park. "They're destroying the park," a red-faced man in a tattered business suit shouted, jabbing a finger at the trolls' leader. "Look at what they've done to Belvedere Castle." I glanced over at the castle, which had indeed been significantly remodeled. The elegant Victorian structure now sported crenellations, a drawbridge, and what appeared to be a bubbling moat of some foul-smelling liquid. Gornak, the troll chieftain, crossed his massive arms defensively. "We improve castle, make stronger, better for defense against bad things." I pinched the bridge of my nose, feeling a headache coming on. "Okay, look, I understand both sides here, but we need to find a way to coexist. Gornak, is there any way you could tone down the renovations a bit?" The troll's craggy face scrunched up in thought. Maybe we remove moat? Humans seem not like smell. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. As I worked to hammer out a compromise, I felt a familiar presence brush against my mind. You're doing well, Ilan's voice whispered. But be careful. The balance is fragile. I nodded imperceptibly, knowing she was right. For every conflict we resolved peacefully, there were a dozen more brewing just beneath the surface, and not everyone was as willing to compromise as Gornik and his clan. That night, as I patrolled the city's new, strange skyline, I caught wind of something that chilled me to the bone. A group of humans, calling themselves the Purity Front, had been targeting non-human settlements. Their latest attack had left a family of brownies homeless and terrified. I tracked them to an abandoned subway station, my enhanced senses picking up the acrid smell of fear and hatred long before I saw them. As I crept closer, their voices echoed off the tiled walls. "We have to take back our world," a woman's voice hissed. "These abominations don't belong here. They're a plague, and we're the cure." I'd heard enough. Stepping into the flickering light of their makeshift base, I let my form shift into something decidedly inhuman. Scales rippled across my skin, my eyes glowing with an inner fire. "Is this the plague you're talking about?" I growled, my voice resonating in the cavernous space. The group, about a dozen strong, scrambled for weapons. But fear had made them clumsy, and before they could mount any real resistance, I had them disarmed and cornered. "Listen to me very carefully," I said, looming over them. "This isn't your world anymore. It belongs to all of us now. If you can't accept that, if you insist on spreading fear and hatred, then you're the ones who don't belong." The leader, a wiry man with wild eyes, spat at my feet. "We'll never stop fighting. This is our home, and we'll die before we let it be overrun by monsters." I sighed, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on me. No one has to die, but things have changed. The world has changed, and if you can't change with it, you'll be left behind. As I turned to leave, planning to alert Thompson's new peacekeeping force to their location, I felt a sharp pain in my back. One of them had managed to get off a lucky shot with a concealed weapon. I stumbled, feeling the bullet lodged near my spine, but instead of falling, I felt a surge of energy coursing through me. My body began to shift and change, taking on aspects of a dozen different creatures in rapid succession. When it was over, I stood before them, healed and transformed. Not quite human, not quite anything else. A true bridge between worlds. "This is what adaptation looks like," I said, my voice a chorus of 1,000 different beings. "This is survival." As I flew back into the night sky, leaving the stunned Purity Front members to be dealt with by the authorities, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The Great Merging had changed everything, and we were all still struggling to find our place in this new, impossible world. But for better or worse, I was at the center of it all. The Riftwalker, they called me. A beacon of hope for some, a harbinger of doom for others. As the first light of dawn broke over the twisted skyline of New York, I made a silent vow. Whatever came next, whatever horrors or wonders this merged world had in store, I would face it head-on. For Aoland, for humanity, for all the beings, human and otherwise, just trying to survive in a reality gone mad. The war wasn't over. In many ways, it had only just begun. But for the first time since I'd woken up in this brave new world, I felt ready to face it. The screams woke me from a fitful sleep, piercing through the relative quiet of the makeshift shelter I'd been calling home. I was on my feet in an instant, my body shifting instinctively into a more combat-ready form, scales rippling across my skin, claws extending from my fingertips. "Not again," I muttered, rushing out into the pre-dawn gloom. The streets of what used to be Manhattan were a maze of rubble and twisted metal, interspersed with pockets of otherworldly growth that had sprung up in the wake of the Great Merging. Bioluminescent fungi cast an eerie glow over the scene, pulsing in time with some unheard rhythm. I followed the sounds of panic to a nearby refugee camp, my enhanced senses picking up the acrid stench of fear long before I arrived. The camp was in chaos, humans and non-humans alike fleeing from something. "What's going on?" I demanded, grabbing the arm of a passing satyr. His eyes were wide with terror, his goat-like legs trembling. "The shadows," he bleated. "They're taking people." I cursed under my breath. This wasn't the first time I'd heard reports of living shadows snatching people in the night, but I'd hoped they were just trauma-induced hallucinations. Apparently not. As I pushed deeper into the camp, I saw them. Inky black tendrils of darkness, writhing and coiling like sentient smoke. They moved with terrifying speed, engulfing screaming victims before dragging them into the deepest shadows. "Oh, hell no," I growled, feeling Aolan's power surging through me. I focused on the nearest tendril, willing my body to produce light. My skin began to glow, first dimly, then with increasing brightness until I was shining like a human lighthouse. The shadow creature recoiled, hissing in a language that hurt my ears. "That's right, you son of a bitch," I snarled. "Pick on someone your own size." The shadow tendril lashed out at me faster than I could react. It wrapped around my arm, and I felt an icy coldness seeping into my very bones. But instead of dragging me away, it recoiled as if burned. "Impossible," a voice rasped, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "You bear the mark of the Veil Walker." I blinked in surprise. The what now? But the shadow creatures were already retreating, slithering back into the darkness with their captives. I tried to follow, but as soon as I stepped into the deeper shadows, I felt a wrenching sensation in my gut, like I was being turned inside out. I stumbled back into the light, gasping for air. Whatever these things were, they existed in a place I couldn't follow, at least not yet. As the camp slowly calmed, I took stock of the situation. Dozens of people were missing, taken by the shadows. Those left behind were shell-shocked, huddled together in the brightest areas they could find. "What do we do now?" a small voice asked. I looked down to see a young girl, no more than 10, staring up at me with tear-filled eyes. "Will you get my mommy back?" I knelt down, trying to project a confidence I didn't feel. "I'm going to try," I promised. "What's your name?" "Lily," she sniffled. "The shadows. They took her." She tried to fight, but I placed a hand on her shoulder, feeling a surge of protectiveness. "Listen to me, Lily. I'm going to find out what these things are, and I'm going to stop them, okay?" She nodded, wiping her nose on her sleeve. "Okay, but be careful. They whisper things. Bad things." A chill ran down my spine at her words. Before I could ask more, I felt a familiar presence brush against my mind. "The child speaks truth," Aolan's voice whispered. "The shadow beings are not of this world, nor any world connected to it. They are something else." "Great," I muttered. "Any idea how to stop them?" There was a pause, and when Aolan spoke again, her voice was tinged with uncertainty. "There may be a way, but it is dangerous. You must seek out the Veil Witch." I frowned. "The Veil Witch? Who's that?" But Aolan's presence was already fading, leaving me with more questions than answers. Over the next few days, I threw myself into researching these shadow beings and the mysterious Veil Witch. I consulted every magical creature I could find, from ancient dragons to mischievous pixies. Most had never heard of either, but a few reacted with fear bordering on panic. It was an old troll named Grimrock who finally gave me something concrete to go on. I found him living in the ruins of the New York Public Library, surrounded by teetering stacks of books both mundane and magical. "The Veil Witch," he rumbled, his voice like grinding stones. "Bad business, that. She walks between worlds, sees things no mortal was meant to see." I leaned forward, eager for any information. "But can she help with the shadow creatures?" Grimrock's craggy face creased in a frown. Maybe, but her help always comes with a price, a steep one. I'll pay it, I said without hesitation. How do I find her? The old troll sighed, reaching for a dusty tome. There's a ritual, but I'm warning you, boy. Once you start down this path, there's no turning back. As Grimrock outlined the steps of the ritual, I felt a growing sense of unease. It involved blood magic, forbidden incantations, and a journey to a place called the Crossroads of Shadows. But I thought of Lily, of all the people taken by the shadows, and knew I had no choice. That night, under a sky stained purple by the lingering effects of the Great Merging, I began the ritual. I'd chosen an abandoned intersection in the heart of the city, the crumbling skyscrapers looming over me like silent sentinels. As I chanted the words Grimrock had taught me, my voice growing hoarse with each repetition, I felt the air around me growing thick and heavy. The shadows at the edges of my vision seemed to writhe and dance, reaching out with grasping tendrils. Just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, the world shifted. The ruined streets of New York fell away, replaced by an endless expanse of gray mist. I stood at a crossroads formed by 4 paths, each stretching off into the fog. Well, well, a silky voice purred from behind me. What have we here? A little lost lamb wandering where he doesn't belong. I spun around to find myself face to face with the most beautiful and terrifying woman I'd ever seen. Her skin was pale as moonlight, her hair a cascade of midnight black. But it was her eyes that held me transfixed, swirling pools of silver that seemed to contain entire universes. "Are you the Veil Witch?" I asked, my mouth suddenly dry. She smiled, revealing teeth that were just a little too sharp to be human. I have been called that, yes, among other things. But the real question is, who are you? Or perhaps more accurately, what are you? I felt a tugging sensation in my chest, and suddenly my body was shifting, cycling through a dozen different forms in rapid succession. Human, dragon, something with too many limbs and eyes, on and on until I thought I would lose myself entirely. Just when I felt like I was about to fly apart at the seams, the Veil Witch raised a hand, and I snapped back to my human form, gasping for air. "Fascinating," she murmured, circling me like a predator sizing up its prey. "You bear the mark of a Veil Walker, and yet you're something more. A bridge between worlds, perhaps?" I straightened up, trying to project more confidence than I felt. "I need your help. There are creatures, shadow beings, stealing people from my world. I need to know how to stop them." The Veil Witch's smile widened, and I was reminded of a cat that had just cornered a particularly juicy mouse. Ah, yes. The Void Feeders. Nasty things, always hungry for the essence of living beings. And you want to stop them? How quaint. "Can you help me or not?" I demanded, my patience wearing thin. She tapped a long, sharp nail against her chin. "I could. But as I'm sure you've been told, my help comes with a price. Are you willing to pay it?" I thought of Lily, of her tear-stained face as she begged me to bring back her mother, of all the other innocents taken by the shadows. "Name it." The Veil Witch's eyes glittered with barely contained glee. "A piece of your soul? Just a small piece, mind you. Hardly anything you'd miss." I felt my blood run cold. "My soul? What would you do with it?" She waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, this and that. Nothing you need to concern yourself with, so, do we have a deal?" Every instinct I had was screaming at me to run, to get as far away from this creature as possible. But I thought of the people counting on me, of the promise I'd made. "Deal," I said, the word feeling like ash in my mouth. The Veil Witch's smile was positively predatory now. "Excellent. Now hold still. This may sting a bit." Before I could react, she plunged her hand into my chest. There was no blood, no breaking of skin, but the pain was indescribable. It felt like she was reaching into the very core of my being and tearing out a piece. When she withdrew her hand, she was holding a small glowing orb of swirling energy. My soul, or at least a piece of it. As I fell to my knees, gasping, The Veil Witch examined her prize with a critical eye. Not bad. A bit rough around the edges, but it'll do. The shadow creatures, I panted, struggling to stay conscious. How do I stop them? She knelt beside me, her lips brushing against my ear as she whispered the secret. As the words sank in, I felt a mixture of hope and dread. It wouldn't be easy, but it was possible. Oh, and one more thing, the Veil Witch said as the gray mist began to swirl around us, signaling the end of our encounter. Do be careful with that power of yours. It's unstable now. Wouldn't want you tearing a hole in reality, would we? Before I could ask what she meant, the crossroads of shadows dissolved around me. I found myself back in the ruined streets of New York, dawn breaking over the horizon. As I struggled to my feet, I became aware of a hollow feeling in my chest, like something vital was missing. But I also felt different, more connected to the spaces between worlds. I looked down at my hands, watching as they shifted and blurred, taking on aspects of a dozen different realities. Whatever the Veil Witch had done to me, it had changed me on a fundamental level. But I didn't have time to dwell on it. I had the knowledge I needed to stop the shadow creatures. Now came the hard part, actually doing it. As I made my way back to the refugee camp, I steeled myself for the battle ahead. It would be dangerous, possibly even suicidal. But I had made a promise, and I intended to keep it. The war against the shadows was about to begin, and I had a feeling it would make the Great Merging look like a walk in the park. The preparation for battling the shadow creatures, the Void Feeders as the Veil Witch had called them, was a nightmare of its own. The ritual required components that would have been difficult to obtain even before the Great Merging turned the world on its head. Now, with reality fractured and bleeding into itself, it was like trying to complete a jigsaw puzzle in the dark while wearing boxing gloves. But I didn't have a choice. Every night, more people disappeared, swallowed by the creeping darkness. The camps were filled with the sounds of weeping and the haunted stares of those left behind. It was Lily who finally broke me out of my obsessive planning. "Are you going to save them soon?" Her small voice piped up from behind me, startling me out of my concentration. I'd been poring over an ancient tome, trying to decipher the cryptic instructions for banishing extra-dimensional entities. I turned to face her, noting the dark circles under her eyes and the way her clothes hung loosely on her frame. She'd lost weight since I'd last seen her, her cheekbones standing out sharply in her gaunt face. "I'm working on it, kiddo," I said, trying to inject some confidence into my voice. "It's complicated." Lily's eyes, too old for her young face, bored into mine. "The whispers are getting louder," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're telling us to give up, to let the shadows take us. Some people are listening." A chill ran down my spine. This was the first I'd heard of the shadows actually communicating with potential victims. It meant things were escalating, and faster than I'd realized. I knelt down, placing my hands on Lily's shoulders. "Listen to me," I said, my voice low and urgent. "Don't listen to the whispers. No matter what they say, no matter how tempting it might seem, don't give in. I'm going to fix this, I promise." She nodded solemnly, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. I couldn't blame her. I'd made that promise weeks ago, and things had only gotten worse. As Lily turned to leave, I felt a familiar presence brush against my mind. "The child speaks truth," Aolan's voice whispered. "The Void Feeders grow stronger with each passing day. You must act soon, or all will be lost." I gritted my teeth, frustration boiling over. "I'm trying," I snapped, not caring if anyone heard me talking to thin air. "But this ritual? It's impossible. I need the heart of a star, for Christ's sake. How am I supposed to get that?" There was a pause, and when Aolan spoke again, her voice was tinged with sadness. "There is a way, but the price—" "I don't care about the price," I interrupted. "Whatever it is, I'll pay it. Just tell me what to do." I could almost feel Aolanda's reluctance as she explained. The heart of a star wasn't literal. It referred to the core of a being of pure energy. A being like, well, like Yolande herself. No, I said, shaking my head vehemently. Absolutely not. There has to be another way. There isn't. Yolande's voice was firm, and you know it. This is why I chose you, why I gave you my power. For moments like this. I wanted to argue, to rail against the unfairness of it all. But deep down, I knew she was right. This was bigger than either of us. With a heavy heart, I began the final preparations for the ritual. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the ruined cityscape, I made my way to the center of what used to be Central Park. The once lush green space had been transformed by the Great Merging, now a wild tangle of otherworldly vegetation and swirling mists. I'd chosen this spot carefully. It was a nexus point, where the barriers between realities were at their thinnest. If there was any place where we could banish the void feeders, it was here. As I began to draw the complex sigils and runes necessary for the ritual, I became aware of movement at the edges of my vision. Shapes darker than the encroaching night, writhing and twisting in impossible ways. They know. Yolande's voice was tight with tension. We must hurry. I worked faster, my hands moving almost of their own accord as I completed the intricate patterns. Just as I placed the final component, a crystal that pulsed with an inner light, the shadows struck. Inky tendrils lashed out, wrapping around my arms and legs. I felt that same bone-deep cold I'd experienced during our first encounter, but this time it was accompanied by whispers, seductive, insidious whispers that promised power, knowledge, an end to all pain and fear. For a moment I faltered. The voices were so convincing, so reasonable. Wouldn't it be easier to just give in? To let the darkness take me? No. Yolande's voice cut through the whispers like a blade of pure light. Remember who you are, what you fight for. Her words snapped me back to reality. With a roar of defiance, I channeled every ounce of power I had into my body. Light erupted from my skin, searing the shadow tendrils and forcing them to retreat. Now, Yolande cried. Begin the ritual. I started chanting, the words feeling strange and heavy on my tongue. As I spoke, the sigils around me began to glow, pulsing in time with my words. The air grew thick and charged, like the moments before a lightning strike. The shadows redoubled their efforts, throwing themselves against the barrier of light I'd created. I could feel it weakening, knew it was only a matter of time before they broke through. Yolande, I gasped between words of power. I'm not strong enough. You are. Her voice was filled with a fierce pride. You've always been strong enough. You just needed to believe it. With those words, I felt a surge of energy unlike anything I'd experienced before. Yolande's essence, the last remnants of her being, flowed into me. In that moment, I understood everything. The nature of reality, the delicate balance between worlds, the true purpose of my transformation. I wasn't just a bridge between worlds. I was a guardian, chosen to protect the barriers between realities. As this knowledge filled me, my voice grew stronger. The words of the ritual took on a life of their own, resonating with the very fabric of existence. The sigils around me blazed with blinding light, and I felt the world shift. Reality seemed to fold in on itself, creating a vortex of swirling energy. The void feeders shrieked in a language that hurt my ears, their shadowy forms being pulled inexorably toward the center of the maelstrom. But something was wrong. The vortex was growing, expanding beyond the boundaries I'd set. I realized with horror that it wasn't just banishing the void feeders, it was tearing a hole in reality itself. Yolande, I cried out, panic rising in my throat. What's happening? Her voice, when it came, was faint and distant. The power, it's too much. You must close the rift or both worlds will be destroyed. I looked around frantically, searching for a way to stop what I'd set in motion. The vortex was growing larger by the second, sucking in everything around it. Trees uprooted themselves, flying into the swirling mass of energy. In the distance, I could hear the screams of people being pulled toward the rift. In that moment of desperation, I remembered the Veil Witch's warning. Do be careful with that power of yours. It's unstable now. Understanding dawned on me. The piece of my soul she'd taken, it had been acting as a stabilizing force for the power Aeolande had given me. Without it, I was like a nuclear reactor without its control rods. There was only one thing I could do. Taking a deep breath, I stepped into the vortex. The sensation was indescribable. Every atom of my being felt like it was being torn apart and reassembled 1,000,000 times a second. I saw realities flash before my eyes. Worlds of crystalline light. Realms of eternal darkness. Places that defied description. Through it all, I held on to one thought. I had to close the rift. I reached out with every ounce of will I possessed, grasping the edges of reality like a torn piece of fabric. With a scream that echoed across dimensions, I pulled. For a moment that felt like eternity. Nothing happened. Then slowly, agonizingly, the edges of the rift began to draw together. I could feel the strain in every fiber of my being, knew that I was burning through Aeolande's power at an alarming rate. Just when I thought I couldn't hold on any longer, when the pain and the pressure threatened to overwhelm me entirely, I felt something. A presence, vast and ancient and utterly alien. It regarded me with what felt like curiosity, then amusement. Before I could process what was happening, I felt a surge of power unlike anything I'd experienced before. The rift snapped closed with a sound like reality itself, sighing in relief. I found myself back in Central Park, or what was left of it. The vortex was gone, along with the void feeders. But the cost. I looked down at my hands, watching as they flickered and shifted, unable to settle on a single form. I could feel realities bleeding into me, knew that I was no longer fully part of any one world. As the sun began to rise over the shattered skyline of New York, I became aware of movement around me. People were emerging from hiding, blinking in the dawn light like they were waking from a long nightmare. Among them I saw a familiar face. Lily pushed her way through the crowd, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and hope. "Did you do it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Did you save them?" I knelt down, my ever-shifting form stabilizing just long enough for me to place a hand on her shoulder. "I did," I said, my voice echoing with the power of 1,000 realities. "They're gone. You're safe now." Lily threw her arms around me, her small body shaking with sobs of relief. Over her shoulder I saw others approaching, humans and non-humans alike, all looking to me with a mixture of awe and uncertainty. I knew then that my journey was far from over. The void feeders were gone, but the world was still broken, reality still fractured. And I was something new, something that had never existed before. A true Veil Walker, guardian of the barriers between worlds. As I stood, Lily's hand clasped tightly in mine, I gazed out at the awakening city. Whatever came next, whatever new horrors or wonders this merged reality had in store, I would face it, for Aeolande, for Lily, for all those caught between worlds. The war against the shadows was over. But in many ways, my true work was just beginning. 6 months had passed since the night I closed the rift and banished the void feeders. 6 months of rebuilding, of trying to establish some semblance of order in a world that had been turned inside out, and 6 months of grappling with what I'd become. I stood atop the twisted spire that had once been the Empire State Building, gazing out at the patchwork reality that New York had become. Entire blocks shimmered with otherworldly energy, while others remained stubbornly anchored in the old world. Creatures of myth and legend walked openly among humans, some embracing their new neighbors, others eyeing them with suspicion and fear. And through it all, I felt the constant pull of the spaces between worlds, the veil that separated realities stretching and warping around me like a living thing. "Penny, for your thoughts?" a familiar voice called from behind me. I turned to see Thompson approaching, looking older and more worn than ever. The former government agent had become an unlikely ally in the aftermath of the rift closure, using his organizational skills to help coordinate relief efforts. Just wondering if we're making any real progress, I sighed, my form shimmering and shifting as it always did when my concentration wavered. Sometimes it feels like we're just putting band-aids on a wound that won't stop bleeding. Thompson snorted, pulling out a battered pack of cigarettes. Welcome to the wonderful world of bureaucracy, kid. Even when the world's gone to hell, paperwork finds a way. I watched as he lit up, the smoke curling around him in patterns that seemed just a little too deliberate to be natural. Another side effect of the merging, even the most mundane actions sometimes took on an air of the mystical. Any word on the missing? I asked, dreading the answer. Thompson's face darkened. Nothing concrete. We've got reports of people showing up in places they shouldn't be. Folks who were taken by the shadows turning up in other cities, other countries. Hell, one guy swears his wife, who disappeared 3 months ago, called him from 1985. I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache coming on. Time displacement, great, just what we needed. On the bright side, Thompson continued, taking a long drag on his cigarette. No new disappearances in the last month. Whatever you did, it seems to have plugged the leak, for now at least. I nodded, trying to take some comfort in that small victory. But before I could respond, I felt a familiar tugging sensation in my gut. The veil was calling. Shit, I muttered. I've got to go. Something's coming through. Thompson's hand went to the modified pistol at his hip. A relic from his old life, now loaded with ammunition designed to harm extra-dimensional entities. Need backup? I shook my head, already feeling my body start to shift and change. No time, I've got to move fast on this one. Without waiting for a response, I launched myself off the building. As I fell, my form blurred and stretched, taking on aspects of a dozen different flying creatures. Wings sprouted from my back, my skin hardened into scales, and my eyes sharpened to telescopic clarity. I soared through the canyons of broken skyscrapers, following the pull of the veil. It led me to Central Park, or what was left of it. The once manicured lawns had become a wild tangle of vegetation from 100 different realities, all competing for dominance. As I landed in a small clearing, I saw it, a ripple in the air like heat haze on a summer day. But this distortion was growing, spreading outward in concentric circles. Oh no, you don't, I growled, reaching out with both hands and my otherworldly senses. I grasped the edges of reality, feeling them strain and buckle under my touch. With a grunt of effort, I pulled, trying to force the tear closed before whatever was on the other side could push through. For a moment, it seemed to be working. The ripple began to shrink, the air smoothing out like a wrinkle being ironed from a shirt. But then, just as I thought I had it under control, something pushed back. The force of it sent me stumbling backward, my feet leaving deep furrows in the alien soil. I redoubled my efforts, channeling every ounce of power I could muster into sealing the breach. Come on, I hissed through gritted teeth. Close, damn you! As if in response to my frustration, the tear suddenly expanded, a blinding light pouring through. I threw up an arm to shield my eyes, blinking away spots as I tried to make out what was emerging. What I saw made my blood run cold. It was me, or rather versions of me. Dozens of them, each one slightly different. Some were more human, others more monstrous. I saw one that looked like a living shadow, another wreathed in flames, yet another that seemed to be made of pure energy. They all turned to face me, their expressions ranging from confusion to hostility to outright hunger. Well, the one closest to me said, its voice an unsettling echo of my own, this is unexpected. I took a step back, my mind reeling. What are you? The other me grinned, the expression not quite reaching its eyes. We're you, of course, or rather, versions of you from other realities. Realities where things went differently. The multiverse theory, I breathed, remembering half-forgotten physics lectures from what felt like a lifetime ago. It's real. Oh, it's very real, another version of me chimed in, this one's skin covered in intricate glowing runes. And thanks to your little stunt with the rift, the barriers between our worlds are weaker than ever. I shook my head, trying to clear it. No, this isn't right. You can't be here. The damage to the fabric of reality is already done, the first one interrupted. Face it, brother. You opened Pandora's box, and now you have to deal with the consequences. As they spoke, I became aware of movement in the park around us. People were gathering, drawn by the commotion and the otherworldly light still spilling from the rift. I saw fear and awe on their faces as they took in the sight of multiple versions of their so-called savior. Among the crowd, I spotted Lily, her eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and hope. "Which one is the real you?" she called out, her voice small but clear. Before I could answer, the shadow version of me stepped forward, its form rippling like smoke. "We're all real, little one. The question is, which one of us deserves to stay in this reality?" I felt a surge of protective anger. "None of you," I snarled, my form shifting into something more combat-ready, claws extending, muscles bulging. "This world has been through enough. It doesn't need the chaos you'll bring." The flame-wreathed me laughed, the sound crackling like a bonfire. "And who are you to decide that? You who tore open the veil in the first place? Face it, you're no better than us." "He's right," the runed version added. "We all made choices, took risks. Some of us paid higher prices than others." It gestured to the shadowy one. He gave up his humanity to save his world. "What did you sacrifice?" The words hit me like a physical blow. I thought of Aoland, of the piece of my soul now in the Veil Witch's possession. But had it been enough? As doubt began to creep in, I felt a small hand slip into mine. I looked down to see Lily standing beside me, her jaw set in determination. "You saved us," she said, her voice stronger now. "You brought my mom back. These others, they're not you. Not really." Her words seemed to break some sort of spell. The other versions of me stirred restlessly, some looking around as if seeing the world for the first time. "This isn't our reality," the energy being said, its voice a strange, echoing thing. "We don't belong here." "Speak for yourself," the shadowy one hissed. "I like it here. So much fear to feed on." I stepped forward, gently moving Lily behind me. "You're right. You don't belong here, and I'm going to send you back." The shadow me bared teeth that seemed too sharp, too numerous. "I'd like to see you try." What followed was a battle unlike anything I'd experienced before. Each version of me had different powers, different weaknesses. We clashed in a whirlwind of shifting forms and reality-warping energies. The park around us was transformed into a patchwork of different environments. Here, a stretch of Arctic tundra. There, a bubbling lava field. Trees uprooted themselves and walked on gnarled roots, while the sky above cycled through a kaleidoscope of alien colors. Through it all, I fought with everything I had, drawing on every scrap of power and knowledge I'd gained. I felt myself changing, adapting, becoming something more with each passing moment. And yet, it wasn't enough. For every alternate me I managed to force back through the rift, two more seemed to take its place. I was being overwhelmed, and I knew it. Just when I thought all was lost, I heard Lily's voice ring out above the chaos. "Remember who you are," she shouted. "Remember why you fight." Her words cut through my fatigue and doubt like a knife. I remembered the night I first met Aoland, the battles we'd fought together, the sacrifices we'd made. I remembered the people I'd sworn to protect, the world I was trying to save. With a roar that shook the very foundations of reality, I unleashed every ounce of power I possessed. Light erupted from my body, searing away the alternate versions of myself and pushing them back toward the rift. As they vanished, screaming, back into the void between worlds, I turned my attention to the tear itself. With hands that were no longer entirely human, I grasped the edges of reality and pulled. The effort was immense, every fiber of my being straining against the weight of multiple universes, but slowly, Agonizingly, the rift began to close. With a sound like reality itself sighing in relief, the tear sealed shut. The alien landscapes that had sprung up during the battle shimmered and faded, leaving behind a battered but recognizable Central Park. I fell to my knees, exhausted beyond measure. As my vision began to dim, I felt small arms wrap around me. "You did it," Lily's voice whispered in my ear. "You saved us again." As consciousness slipped away, I managed a small smile. Yes, I had saved them. For now. But I knew, with a certainty born of my newfound connection to the multiverse, that this was just the beginning. The barriers between realities were weakening, and I was the only thing standing between this world and utter chaos. It was a daunting responsibility, but one I knew I had to bear, for Lily, for Eoland, for every soul and every reality that needed protection. As I drifted into unconsciousness, I made a silent vow. No matter what came through the veil next, no matter what horrors or wonders the multiverse had in store, I would be ready. The war for reality itself had only just begun. The morning sun struggled to penetrate the thick canopy of the Appalachian forest as I made my way along a barely visible trail. My boots crunched on fallen leaves, the sound seeming unnaturally loud in the eerie quiet. It had been months since Eoland and I had parted ways, but the events of the past year still weighed heavily on my mind. I paused, leaning against a gnarled oak tree, and pulled out my satellite phone. No signal. I wasn't surprised. These remote areas were chosen specifically for their isolation. I sighed, pocketing the device and continuing my trek. As I crested a small hill, I caught sight of a plume of smoke rising in the distance. My heart raced. This was it, the location I'd been searching for. I quickened my pace, my hand instinctively moving to the pistol at my hip. The closer I got, the more details I could make out. What I had initially thought was a small campfire revealed itself to be the smoldering remains of a larger structure. The acrid smell of burnt wood and something else, something sickly, sweet, and chemical, filled my nostrils. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing through the trees. "Is anyone there?" No response came, save for the crackle of dying embers. I approached cautiously, my eyes scanning the area for any signs of movement. The scene before me was one of utter devastation. What had once been a modest log cabin was now a charred skeleton, wisps of smoke still rising from its blackened bones. As I picked my way through the debris, a glint of metal caught my eye. I knelt down, brushing aside a layer of ash to reveal a small, ornate locket. With trembling hands, I opened it, already knowing what I would find inside. A tiny photograph of a young girl with iridescent eyes stared back at me. A Kandorian, one of the rarest cryptid species known to exist. "Damn it," I muttered, clenching the locket in my fist. This was the third attack this month, and it was becoming clear that these weren't random acts of violence. Someone, or something, was systematically targeting cryptid communities. A twig snapped behind me, and I whirled around, drawing my weapon in one fluid motion. "Who's there?" I demanded, my eyes straining to see through the smoky haze. A figure emerged from the tree line, hands raised in a gesture of peace. As it drew closer, I recognized the familiar shimmer of a shapeshifter's aura. My grip on the gun loosened slightly, but I didn't lower it entirely. "Jace?" A familiar voice called out. "Is that you?" Relief washed over me as I recognized the voice. "Eolanda," I breathed, finally lowering my weapon. "What are you doing here?" As she stepped into the clearing, I was struck by how different she looked. Gone was the otherworldly child I had first encountered in the forest. In her place stood a woman who appeared to be in her mid-30s, with long silver hair and eyes that shimmered with an inner light. "I could ask you the same thing," she replied, her gaze sweeping over the destroyed cabin. "Though I suspect we're here for similar reasons." I nodded grimly. "Another attack. That makes 3 this month." Eoland's expression darkened. 4, actually. There was another one in West Virginia 2 days ago. A family of Lumerians. Survivors? She shook her head, and I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. Damn it. I muttered again, running a hand through my hair. This is getting out of control, Yolande. We need to do something. We are doing something, Jace, she said, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. That's why we're both here, isn't it? I looked into her eyes, seeing the same determination I felt reflected back at me. Despite the months we'd spent apart, our connection was as strong as ever. Yeah, I agreed. I just wish we could do more. Yolande nodded, her gaze drifting back to the ruins of the cabin. We will. But first we need to gather what information we can from this site. There might be clues about who's behind these attacks. We spent the next hour combing through the debris, looking for anything that might give us a lead. As we worked, we fell into an easy rhythm, our movements synchronized as if we'd never been apart. Jace, Yolande called out suddenly. Come look at this. I made my way over to where she was crouched, examining something on the ground. As I drew closer, I saw what had caught her attention, a small vial miraculously unbroken amidst the destruction. What is it? I asked, kneeling beside her. Yolande carefully picked up the vial, holding it up to the light. Inside, a viscous black liquid swirled ominously. I'm not sure, she admitted. But I've seen something like this before, at one of the other attack sites. It gives off a strange energy, almost like it's alive. I frowned, a chill running down my spine. You think it's connected to the attacks? I'm certain of it, Yolande replied, her voice grim. Whatever this substance is, it's not natural, and it's definitely not of this world. As if on cue, a low rumble echoed through the forest. We both froze, our eyes meeting in shared alarm. Did you hear that? I whispered. Yolande nodded, her body tensing. It came from the north about half a mile, I'd guess. Without another word, we both took off running in the direction of the sound. As we crashed through the underbrush, I could hear my heart pounding in my ears. Whatever was happening, we both knew it couldn't be good. We burst into another clearing, and I skidded to a halt, my mouth dropping open in shock. Before us stood a massive machine easily the size of a small house. It looked like something out of a science fiction movie, all sleek lines and pulsing lights. But what truly caught my attention were the figures operating it. Are those humans? I whispered to Yolande, who had come to a stop beside me. She shook her head slowly, her eyes narrowed. No, she replied softly. Look closer. I squinted, trying to make out more details through the strange, shimmering field that surrounded the machine. As I focused, I realized with a start that what I had taken for human forms were anything but. Their proportions were slightly off, their movements too fluid to be natural, and their eyes glowed with an eerie, otherworldly light. What are they? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Shapeshifters, Yolande replied, her tone a mixture of awe and fear, but not like any I've ever seen before. They're corrupted somehow. As we watched, one of the figures approached the machine, carrying a large container. With a series of precise movements, it began to pour a familiar black liquid into an opening on the side of the device. That's the same stuff we found in the vial, I hissed, my hand instinctively moving to my weapon. Yolande placed a restraining hand on my arm. Wait, she cautioned. We need to know what they're doing before we act. Reluctantly, I nodded, forcing myself to remain still as we continued to observe the strange scene before us. The machine began to hum, the sound growing in intensity until it was almost painful to hear. The air around it seemed to ripple and distort, and I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. Yolande, I gasped, fighting the urge to vomit. What's happening? Her face had gone pale, her eyes wide with horror. They're opening a portal, she whispered. A gateway between worlds. Before I could ask what she meant, the air in front of the machine suddenly tore open, revealing a swirling vortex of darkness. The corrupted shapeshifters began to chant in a language I didn't recognize, their voices rising in a discordant chorus. "We have to stop them," I said, drawing my weapon. "Whatever they're doing, it can't be good." Yolanda nodded grimly. "Agreed. But be careful, Jace. These aren't ordinary enemies we're facing." With that, we burst from our hiding place, catching the shapeshifters by surprise. I fired off several shots, aiming for the machine rather than the figures themselves. Sparks flew as the bullets impacted, but the device seemed largely unaffected. Beside me, Aoland had shifted into a form I'd never seen before, part human, part something else entirely. Her body seemed to ripple and flow like liquid mercury, and bolts of energy crackled around her. The corrupted shapeshifters recovered quickly from their initial shock, turning to face us with inhuman snarls. As they moved to attack, I realized with growing dread that my bullets had little effect on them. "Aoland," I shouted over the growing chaos. "How do we stop them?" She dodged a vicious swipe from one of the creatures. Her voice strained as she replied, "The machine. We have to destroy it." I nodded, focusing my fire on what looked like a control panel. Meanwhile, Aoland engaged the shapeshifters directly, her form constantly shifting as she fought. The battle was unlike anything I had ever experienced. The corrupted shapeshifters moved with impossible speed and strength, their forms twisting and changing in ways that defied logic. More than once, I found myself narrowly avoiding attacks that would have surely been fatal. As I emptied another clip into the machine, I noticed with growing alarm that the portal was expanding, tendrils of darkness reaching out into our world. "Aoland," I called out. "Whatever's coming through that portal, we can't let it get here." She nodded grimly, her attention divided between the shapeshifters and the growing threat. "I know," she shouted back, "but I don't know if we can close it on our own." Just as despair began to creep in, I remembered the vial we had found earlier. "The black liquid," I yelled. "Maybe it's the key." Understanding flashed in Aoland's eyes. With a burst of speed, she disengaged from her opponents and raced towards me. "Cover me!" she commanded, reaching for the vial I held out to her. I turned, laying down, suppressing fire as Aoland approached the machine. The corrupted shapeshifters, seeming to realize our plan, redoubled their efforts to stop us. Time seemed to slow as Aoland reached the portal. With a fluid motion, she uncorked the vial and poured its contents directly into the swirling vortex. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sound like reality itself tearing apart, the portal began to collapse in on itself. The corrupted shapeshifters let out inhuman screams of rage and despair as they were pulled towards the imploding gateway. I watched in horrified fascination as they were sucked in, their forms twisting and dissolving as they disappeared into the void. As quickly as it had begun, it was over. The portal snapped shut with a thunderous boom, leaving behind nothing but a faint shimmer in the air. The forest fell silent, the only sound our ragged breathing. I stumbled over to Aoland, who had collapsed to her knees. "Are you all right?" I asked, helping her to her feet. She nodded weakly, her form slowly stabilizing into her more familiar appearance. "I think so," she replied. "But Jace, what we just saw, what we just did—" "I know," I said, my mind reeling from the implications. "This is bigger than anything we've faced before." Aoland's eyes met mine, filled with a mixture of determination and fear. The attacks, the corrupted shapeshifters, this portal, it's all connected. Someone, or something, is trying to bridge the gap between worlds, and I fear this is only the beginning. I nodded grimly, my gaze sweeping over the now silent clearing. The machine stood dormant, its lights dimmed, but still operational. "What do we do now?" I asked. Aoland straightened, a look of resolve settling over her features. "We gather our allies, we prepare for what's coming, and we find a way to stop this before it's too late." As we made our way back through the forest, leaving the ominous machine behind to be dealt with later, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had just stepped onto a much larger battlefield. The war for the future of both humans and cryptids was no longer confined to our world alone. Whatever came next, I knew one thing for certain. Aoland and I would face it together. The fate of two worlds, and perhaps many more, rested on our shoulders, and we would not let them fall. The harsh fluorescent lights of the underground bunker cast long shadows across the war room. Maps and diagrams covered every available surface, each marked with red pins indicating attack sites. I stood before them, my eyes tracing the patterns we'd uncovered over the past weeks. Yolande's voice broke through my concentration. "Jace, the latest reports are in." I turned to face her, noting the dark circles under her eyes. We'd both been pushing ourselves to the limit, sleeping in short bursts between crisis management and strategy sessions. "How bad?" I asked, dreading the answer. Aoland's form shimmered slightly, a sign of her exhaustion. 3 more attacks in the last 24 hours. A Selkie colony off the coast of Maine, a family of thunderbirds in Arizona, and... She hesitated, her voice catching. "And?" I prompted gently. "A nursery of young dryads in the Black Forest, Germany." Aoland's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. None survived. I slammed my fist against the table, sending papers fluttering to the floor. "Damn it, we're always one step behind." Aoland placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. "We're doing everything we can, Jace, but this enemy, it's like nothing we've ever faced before." I nodded, taking a deep breath to calm myself. "You're right. We need to focus on what we do know." I turned back to the maps. The attacks are increasing in frequency and scale. Whatever's coming through those portals, it's gathering strength. A knock at the door interrupted our discussion. Dr. Eliza Chen, our lead scientist, entered, her face grave. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but you need to see this." We followed her to the lab, where a team of human and cryptid scientists huddled around a containment unit. Inside, a small vial of the black liquid we'd encountered at the attack sites swirled ominously. Dr. Chen pointed to a monitor displaying a microscopic view of the substance. "We've been analyzing the sample you brought back and, well, see for yourself." As we watched, the black particles in the liquid began to move, forming complex patterns before our eyes. "Is it alive?" I asked, unable to hide my revulsion. Dr. Chen nodded. "In a sense. It's not like any life form we've encountered before, but it definitely exhibits signs of intelligence and purpose." Yolanda leaned in closer, her eyes narrowing. "There's something familiar about these patterns. They remind me of ancient morphling texts, but twisted, corrupted somehow." "That's not all," Dr. Chen continued. "We've discovered that this substance is incredibly versatile. It can adapt to and infect almost any organic matter it encounters, but its effect on cryptids is particularly aggressive." A chill ran down my spine. "You mean it's specifically targeting non-human species?" Dr. Chen nodded grimly. "It appears so. When introduced to cryptid cellular samples, it doesn't just destroy them. It rewrites them at a fundamental level. We believe this is what's causing the corruption we've seen in the shapeshifters and other affected cryptids." Aolanda's face had gone pale. "A virus," she whispered. "A virus designed to purge the world of all but the strongest cryptids." The implications hit me like a physical blow. But why? Who would create something like this? Before anyone could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Red emergency lights bathed the lab in an eerie glow. "Security breach in Sector 7, a voice announced over the intercom. "All personnel evacuate immediately." We sprung into action, years of training kicking in. "Dr. Chen, secure the samples and initiate emergency protocols," I ordered. "Aolanda, with me." As we raced through the corridors, the sound of gunfire and inhuman screeches echoed from somewhere ahead. We rounded a corner to find a scene of chaos. Several of our security personnel lay motionless on the ground, while others exchanged fire with a group of twisted, corrupted cryptids. Among them stood a figure that made my blood run cold. It appeared human at first glance, but there was an otherworldly quality to its movements, a fluidity that betrayed its true nature. Morphling, Iolande breathed beside me, her voice a mixture of awe and horror. The figure turned, its eyes locking onto us. A smile spread across its face, too wide to be natural. "Ah, the heroes arrive at last," it said, its voice carrying an echo of countless others. "I was beginning to think you'd miss all the fun." I raised my weapon, but Iolanda placed a restraining hand on my arm. "Wait," she whispered. "I know him." The morphling's smile widened further. "Oh, you remember me, little one? I'm flattered. It's been so long since we last met. When was it? The fall of Atlantis? The burning of Alexandria?" Iolanda stepped forward, her form shimmering as she prepared for a potential fight. "Malachi," she said, her voice carrying a weight of history I couldn't begin to comprehend. "What have you done to yourself?" Malachi spread his arms wide, his form rippling like water. "I've evolved, my dear. Adapted. Something our kind should have done long ago, instead of hiding in the shadows while humans destroy this world." "By corrupting other cryptids?" I interjected, unable to keep the disgust from my voice. "By unleashing a virus that could wipe out entire species." Malachi's gaze snapped to me, his eyes narrowing. "Ah, the human speaks. Tell me, little man, what do you know of survival, of watching your kind dwindle and fade over millennia?" "Enough," Iolande shouted, her form fully shifting now into something both beautiful and terrifying. "This isn't survival, Malachi. It's genocide." Malachi sighed, a sound like wind through ancient trees. "I had hoped you'd understand, Iolande. You, of all our kind, should see the necessity of what I'm doing." "What you're doing is an abomination," Iolande replied, her voice resonating with power. "And I will stop you." Malachi's expression hardened. "So be it." With a gesture, the corrupted cryptids surged forward, their twisted forms a mockery of their original beauty. The battle that ensued was like nothing I'd ever experienced. Iolande moved with inhuman grace, her form constantly shifting to counter each attack. I did my best to support her, my bullets finding their mark, but seeming to do little lasting damage to our otherworldly opponents. As we fought, Malachi stood back, watching with an almost detached curiosity. "You fight well," he called out. "But surely you must see the futility of your struggle. The virus has already spread far beyond this facility. Even now, it races through the hidden corners of the world, seeking out the weak and unworthy." "Why?" I shouted, dodging a swipe from what might have once been a werewolf. "Why do this?" Malachi's eyes met mine, and for a moment, I saw the weight of centuries in them. "Because it's the only way to ensure our survival. Humanity has pushed us to the brink of extinction. This virus, it will cull the weak, yes, but those who survive will be stronger than ever. A new race of cryptids capable of adapting to any threat. At the cost of countless innocent lives," Iolande retorted, her voice filled with anguish. "A necessary sacrifice," Malachi replied coldly. "You of all people should understand that, Iolande. How many civilizations have we watched rise and fall? How many times have we had to reinvent ourselves to survive?" As we continued to battle the corrupted cryptids, I could see the toll it was taking on Iolande. Each opponent she faced was a twisted version of a being she had known, perhaps for centuries. The pain in her eyes was almost unbearable to witness. Suddenly, a piercing scream cut through the chaos. One of the corrupted cryptids, a being that might once have been a siren, had broken through our defenses and was heading straight for the lab where Dr. Chen and her team were working. "No!" I shouted, breaking away from the fight to give chase. I could hear Iolande calling after me, but I couldn't let the virus samples fall into enemy hands. I burst into the lab just in time to see the corrupted siren cornering Dr. Chen, who was clutching a sealed container to her chest. Without hesitation, I fired, my bullets tearing through the creature's twisted form. But as it fell, a tendril of black liquid shot out from its body, snaking towards the containment unit where we kept the virus samples. Time seemed to slow as I watched, helpless as the tendril made contact with the unit. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Alarms blared as the containment protocols were breached. The black liquid inside the unit began to churn and expand, pressing against the reinforced glass. "We need to evacuate now," I yelled, grabbing Dr. Chen and pulling her towards the exit. "Initiate full lockdown procedures." As we raced back towards the main battle, I could hear the sound of shattering glass behind us. The virus was loose. We emerged into the corridor to find Eoland locked in combat with Malachi, their forms shifting and merging in ways that defied comprehension. The other corrupted cryptids lay defeated around them, but the cost had clearly been high. "Eoland," I called out. "The virus is free. We need to contain it." Malachi's laughter echoed through the facility. "Contain it? You fool. You've just ensured its spread. Soon it will reach the surface and the Great Purge will truly begin." Eolanda's eyes met mine, and I saw in them a terrible resolve. "Jace," she said, her voice carrying even over the blaring alarms, "you need to go. Get everyone out. Seal the facility." "What? No," I protested. "I'm not leaving you." "You must," she insisted. "I'm the only one who can stop this now, but I need you to make sure it doesn't spread beyond these walls." I hesitated, torn between my duty and my heart. "Eoland," she smiled, a sad, beautiful expression that I knew would haunt me for the rest of my days. "Go, Jace. Save our world. Both our worlds." With a heavy heart, I nodded. Dr. Chen with me. "We're initiating full evacuation and lockdown." As we raced towards the exit, coordinating the evacuation over the facility's comm system, I couldn't help but look back. Eoland and Malachi were now fully engaged in battle, their forms merging and separating in a dance as old as time itself. And behind them, a wave of black liquid advanced, consuming everything in its path. We barely made it out before the blast doors sealed, locking Eoland in with the virus and the being who had unleashed it upon the world. As the last of the evacuation transports pulled away, I stood on a nearby hill, watching the entrance to the hidden facility. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then a tremor ran through the ground, followed by another, stronger one. A pillar of blinding light erupted from the facility, shooting straight up into the sky. "What's happening?" Dr. Chen asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I shook my head, unable to take my eyes off the spectacle before us. "I don't know. But whatever it is, Eoland's at the heart of it." The light continued to build in intensity until it was painful to look at directly. Then, with a sound like reality itself tearing apart, it imploded, collapsing in on itself with terrifying speed. When the dust settled and our vision cleared, there was nothing left of the facility but a massive crater. Of Eoland, Malachi, and the virus, there was no sign. As the enormity of what had just happened began to sink in, I felt a weight settle onto my shoulders. Eoland had sacrificed herself to save both our worlds, but the threat was far from over. The virus was still out there, spreading through the hidden corners of the world. I turned to Dr. Chen, my voice hoarse but determined. "We need to gather everyone, all our allies, human and cryptid alike. This isn't over." She nodded, her face grim but resolute. "What's our next move?" I looked back at the crater one last time, silently vowing to honor Eolanda's sacrifice. "We finish what we started. We find a cure for this virus, and we bring Malachi's organization down. For Eoland, for all of us." As we made our way back to the evacuation transports, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a much larger battle. The war for the future of both humans and cryptids had taken a dark turn, and the stakes were higher than ever. But as I looked at the determined faces of the survivors around me, humans and cryptids working side by side, I felt a glimmer of hope. Whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, and somehow, some way, we would find a way to save our world and honor the sacrifice of those we'd lost along the way. The fate of two worlds, and perhaps many more, still rested on our shoulders, and we would not let them fall. For Aoland, for the countless innocents lost to this terrible virus, we would fight on. The battle was far from over, but with unity, determination, and the memory of those we'd lost to guide us, I believed we still had a chance. As the transports lifted off, carrying us towards an uncertain future, I made a silent vow. We would find a way to reverse the effects of the virus, to save those who had been corrupted. And when we did, we would build a world where humans and cryptids could coexist in peace, a world Aoland had always dreamed of. The journey ahead would be long and fraught with danger, but as I looked at the diverse group of beings around me, I knew we were up for the challenge. Together, we would write the next chapter in this epic struggle and ensure that Aoland's sacrifice was not in vain. As the last traces of the facility disappeared behind us, I closed my eyes, allowing myself one moment of grief for all we had lost. Then, taking a deep breath, I turned to face the future, whatever it might hold. The story wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning.